Chapter 166. Su Fu still refused to leave, even though he found nothing after searching for a while. Like a vulture who had smelled the smell of rotting corpses but could not find any meat, he kept circling around the hall, his pair of glowing green eyes glancing around. When the old man entered the hall, Wu Qi immediately saw his pair of green eyes that looked like a ghost flame. There was a fine line in the middle of his pupils, dividing them into two halves. Both of them were shaped like the sun and the moon, emanating a strange cold gleam. According to the Scroll of Stealing, this pair of pupils was a mystic technique that only those practitioners of primordial runes could see through yin and yang, as well as everything under the heaven. It was a pair of eyes that could see through yin and yang, as well as everything under the heaven. In front of someone who possessed this pair of eyes, even those who had cultivated the breath control technique of Scroll of Stealing would have to be extra careful. The muscles on Ying Zheng's body were twisting and rolling at an incredible speed, while countless tiny granulation tissues were growing out from the huge, ferocious-looking wound on his chest. Drops of sticky, pitch-black demon energy were being forced out from the wound by an enormous amount of energy, turning into a pungent smoke that dissipated into the air. Ying Zheng's eyes went wide, his body trembling as he clenched his fists tightly and kept letting out low and deep strange laughter. "I swear I'll kill you. You are just a demon dragon, yet you refuse to offer your blood essence and soul to help me cultivate the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. This is a capital offense." After a while, Ying Zheng's body was finally cleaned. He lowered his head and looked at the wound on his chest, which seemed to have shrunk to the size of a hair. He shook his head angrily and said, "What a demon dragon! What a demon dragon! With just one strike, you have killed 30,000 of my elite soldiers, and even wounded me severely. When I've completed the first level of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, condensed my dragon soul and nascent divinity, and become a heaven immortal, I'll kill you and let me cultivate the second level of the cultivation technique." Therefore, Wu Qi closed his eyes, daring not to reveal even the slightest bit of divine gleam. He even held his breath and retracted all his aura, using a mystic technique to stop his heartbeat. All the functions of his body were almost in a state of dead silence. The innate Earth Yuan Ling energy enveloped Wu Qi, transforming him into an earth ball that looked exactly like a lump of soil and burying him under the ground. Ying Zheng was overjoyed. "Is there such a thing? Do you know where that cultivator came from? Where did he come from? Which country is it under?" Not to mention the loss of military strength, Ying Zheng's 2 bodyguards were supposed to be his stewards. When Ying Zheng traveled, he brought along a huge amount of energy stones, formation discs used to construct teleportation formations, and many other treasures. He wanted to keep in touch with the capital city of Xianyang at all times, so that he could receive the army and supplies at any time. To be able to communicate with Xianyang, which was hundreds of millions of miles away, the number of spirit stones and array discs must be considerable. It would require a large number of storage artifacts to store them. Served by serving ladies, Ying Zheng put on the imperial robe and crown, then slowly rose to his feet. The dark mist in the great hall slowly fused into his body, and the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent vanished without a trace. He took out a small purple gold bar and lightly tapped it on a jade bell hanging by the side of the bed. A clear and melodious sound of the bell immediately spread far away. Not long after that, a series of footsteps was heard. An old man with a short stature, thin face, clad in a black, wide-sleeved robe and a tall, round crown walked slowly into the great hall. At the same time, the Scroll of Stealing also warned Wu Qi that all the practitioners who had the qualification to cultivate this kind of Dharma were those who had immersed themselves in the Tao of primordial runes for a very long time and had a very profound cultivation base. Therefore, once Wu Qi bumped into them, he had to be extra careful, and if anything went wrong, he had to flee 10,000 miles away immediately. Otherwise, with the bizarre and powerful Tao of primordial runes, a slight carelessness could result in a serious injury or even death. The entire great hall was enshrouded by the dark mist, and the water vapor in the air was increasing rapidly. The bronze candlestick in front of Wu Qi was now fully covered with water droplets. Underneath the roof of the great hall, There were some faint electric arcs flashing, while the water vapor turned into dark clouds and rubbed against the ceiling, producing a faint rumbling of thunder. Ing Zheng was seen sitting cross-legged amidst the dark clouds and dark mist, while 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent were seen wheeling and wheeling in the dark mist behind him, emanating a matchless aura. The boundless murderous aura had condensed into a pressure that was as heavy as a mountain, so heavy that it almost materialized. Needless to say, Wu Qi was coveting the energy essence in Su Fu's eyes more and more, and his desire for the mystic eyes of universe grew stronger. Ing Zheng snorted heavily. After a long moment of silence, he said in a cruel and merciless tone, "Left and right Minister Feng Bao was useless, as he had lost all the energy stones and formation discs that I brought with me on this trip. They were killed by the demon dragons, and that's not a big deal. But their people had slaughtered 3 clans as a warning to the others. Minister Feng Bao, their duty is to protect my treasures. Their negligence this time is unforgivable." The old man walked slowly into the great hall, then with a solemn expression he dropped to his knees and bowed deeply to Ing Zheng. "Your subject, Su Fu, offers greetings, Your Majesty." After a moment of silence, Su Fu said with a dry voice, "That young cultivator killed 20 of the Jin Dan cavalry generals under the command of General Bai Qitian of Yulin Forest, and was trying to escape by escaping through the earth. His Excellency Li Si struck and killed him with the divine ability of spell conjuration. With his flesh and bones turned into mud, it is impossible to get a confession from him." It was also mentioned in Scroll of Stealing that if one could steal a thread of energy from the eyes of someone who cultivated this kind of eyes, it would allow the cultivation technique of spirit eyes to be greatly improved, and a pair of spirit eyes would have endless magical uses. If he could find some other precious materials, combined with a mystic technique in Scroll of Stealing called Mystic Eyes of Universe, Wu Qi's pair of eyes would definitely possess a power that could shake the heaven. Wherever the green light reached, the ground would turn transparent as well. From the ground all the way to 10,000 feet underground, everything had turned into a transparent object that shone with a faint green light. Hiding a few feet under the ground, Wu Qi could feel an indescribable, bone-piercing cold and extremely evil glimmer sprinkling down from the top of his head, nearly separating his body from the innate earth Yuanling energy. As a supreme emperor, Ing Zheng could never wear all 10 fingers full of storage rings like some nouveau riche. That was why he had left and right servants to carry and manage all these energy stones and spirit items for him. In the end, the demon dragon unleashed its mighty power and killed left and right servants, while all the energy stones and spirit items were taken away by the demon dragon. With that, Ing Zheng and his company were basically trapped in Meng Mountains. That was indeed a very bad luck. Wu Qi shook his head gloatingly. Su Fu, on the other hand, stayed in the hall and did not leave. He walked around the hall a few times suspiciously, then suddenly opened his eyes. A large patch of dark green light shone from them, and he scanned the hall from top to bottom. Wherever the green light passed through, everything turned transparent. No matter it was gold and silver utensils, wood, soil, or rocks, everything turned into ripples and glazes. With a casual point of his finger, the dark light abruptly transformed into countless tiny dark threads, blotting out the sky and covering the entire grand hall, turning it into a sieve. After a full hour, the grand hall in front of him was filled with the sound of music and toasts. Only then did Su Fu stomp his feet and leave the grand hall with a cold smile on his face. But he had only taken a few steps when he suddenly waved his hand. A strange black beam, measuring 1 foot and 3 inches long and several hundred times thinner than a hair, emerged on his finger. Ing Zheng let out a few loud laughs, then strode out of the grand hall. While walking, he laughed wildly and said, "My dear subjects, please join me. Haha, today, Prince of Wuhan has found several hundred beautiful barbarian girls. My dear subjects, you have been working hard recently. Please join me. Somebody play the music and start the banquet." Ing Zheng's loud laughter gradually faded away, followed by countless loud and sonorous cries of "Long live," emanating shockingly strong energy ripples. Obviously, Ing Zheng had brought an army of tens of thousands of miles to this place. Needless to say, he did not have any good intentions. However, he was cultivating with a certain divine ability, the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, which required him to plunder the blood essence and souls of flood dragons and fuse them into his own body. Only then could he keep improving his cultivation base. In Meng Mountains, they had met a demon dragon who had almost cultivated to the realm of heaven immortal. Therefore, Ingzheng had brought an army to slay the dragon excitedly. But little did he expect that the overall strength of the demon dragon was too strong. Ingzheng himself was severely wounded, and his army was nearly slaughtered by the demon dragon. Wu Qi closed his eyes and shrunk his head 3 feet deep into the ground, relying on his sensitive ears to eavesdrop on the noises coming from above. He hesitated for a while, then with a green gleam flashing in his eyes, he said with a dry voice, "Xianyang is millions of miles away from here. Without some extraordinary treasures such as spatial breaching spirit gold as the core of the formation, the consumption will be too great. On top of that, the magnetic field in this mountain is chaotic, and the energy needed to break through the void has skyrocketed by 100 times. The energy stones I've collected now are not enough for me to communicate with Xianyang." Clenching his teeth so tightly that they produced cracking noises, Ingzheng continued to exert the energies in his body to force out the remaining demon energy in his wounds. The process went on for a full 15 minutes. Suddenly, a large amount of sticky sweat burst out from all over Ingzheng's body. He gasped for breath rapidly, then leaned back on the bed, feeling a little tired. Those serving ladies quickly came up to him, using hot water and silk handkerchiefs to wipe off the sticky sweat that came with a strange stench from his body. However, when Wu Qi looked at the soil and rocks around him that had turned transparent, he could not help but feel his heart tremble with fear. Su Fu's divine ability of Dharma eyes was truly frightening. Although Wu Qi had fused his innate energies of 5 elements into his eyes, he could only see a depth of a few feet deep into the ground. Surprisingly, this divine eye of Su Fu could actually see 10,000 feet deep into the ground, and its power was comparable to some unique spirit items. Then he heard Su Fu say with an indifferent voice, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. Just now, Prime Minister Li Si met a cultivator, and judging from his appearance, he is not a barbarian living in this forest. Since that cultivator could appear here, it proves that this place is not far away from a populated area. As long as we can find their city, we can have as many energy stones and items as we want." Fortunately, the innate energies had endless magical effects. Although Su Fu's divine eye was strange and unfathomable, his cultivation base was still slightly weaker. The Yuan Ling energy that shrouded Wu Qi's body had almost flawlessly imitated the transformation of the soil and rocks around him, making Wu Qi's body turn transparent under the bright green light. Su Fu ran his eyes across the entire hall and the ground within 1,000 feet in circumference, but found nothing either. Su Fu rose to his feet and answered with a solemn voice, "Your Majesty, for the past few days, all the generals and soldiers have risked their lives to hunt barbarians and collect energy stones from all over the place. We have gathered 130,000 pieces of upper-grade energy stones, but the most important one, the supreme-grade energy stones, are only less than 3,000. If we are going to deploy a teleportation formation, we will need reinforcements from Xianyang City." You see, Ingzheng scolded fiercely, then burst into a loud laughter. "It doesn't matter, as long as we can find cultivators who are not from those barbarians, it proves that we are not far away from a populated area. No matter how far it is, as long as we can find a city, with my army of several 100,000 soldiers, we will be able to wipe out an entire kingdom. As long as we can deploy the teleportation formation, we will be able to bring reinforcements from Xianyang City here." With his hands clasped behind his back, Ingzheng looked at Su Fu and said coolly, "Rise. How many energy stones have you collected in the past few days?" He gave the hall a quick glance and did not find anything unusual. Then, he turned his eyes back to the ground. One was borrowing, while the other was controlling. The difference between them was like the difference between the clouds and the mud. Wu Qi stared at Ingzheng with great shock. At first glance, the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent behind him looked very similar to the cultivation technique practiced by the beast warriors of Great Yan Dynasty. However, the beast warriors were only borrowing the enormous power contained in the beast souls for their own use. Unlike Yingjing, the power of the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent had completely fused with his body, and there was a tsunami of energy rocking and rocking in his body. All the power was under his complete control. Upon hearing Yingjing's words, Wu Qi suddenly understood the predicament Yingjing and his men were in. Chapter 167. The spring rain was silent, and so was the dark beams. They gently penetrated through all the furnishings in the hall, leaving behind countless tiny holes that could not be seen by naked eyes. After that, the dark beams pierced into the ground soundlessly, going 1,000 feet deep into the ground and bringing up wisps of dark smoke wherever they went. Several dozens of dark beams brushed past Wu Qi's body, and Wu Qi could smell a faint stench coming from the dark smoke. They had a very strong penetrating force, and contained a deadly poison. Carefully, Wu Qi used his divine sense to scan through one of the dark beams that flew past him. He discovered that it was actually the condensation of an extremely vicious acquired poisonous gas from the Earth's core, mixed with the aurora found in the sky and the aura of the dark night that came from the last ray of sunlight in the sky every day. It turned an intangible object into a tangible object, then from a tangible object back to an intangible object. The process was repeated a few times, and then mixed with several dozens of poisonous objects that could cause a great harm to the corporeal body and soul of cultivators. It was a vicious technique that was between a magical treasure and a divine ability. It was extremely powerful, and once it hurt someone, the consequences would be very serious. The corporeal body of ordinary earth immortals would be penetrated by it, and once infected by the poison contained in it, even the dharma body of an earth immortal would rot and disintegrate, and even his nascent soul would suffer a great harm. Such a vicious thing was recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, but this was the first time Wu Qi had seen something so vicious. Looking at the countless dark beams that had cleansed the entire hall, Su Fu frowned and shook his head. Am I really getting old? Why do I feel something is not right? TSK, something is still not right. Why do I always feel so nervous? He spun and walked 2 rounds around the hall. Suddenly, he stretched out his right index finger, and a tiny thread of dark beam quickly condensed into a strange, twisting rune. Then, he casually shot the rune into the ground. Suddenly, the ground under the great hall froze, turning from an ordinary soil to a texture as dense as steel. Clanging noises rang out as countless blades suddenly took shape under the ground. Bringing with them an eerie cold breeze, they swept and slashed in all directions, turning the ground into a mess. As the steel saber hacked down, a 10,000 meters wide ball of poisonous flames silently rose from tens of thousands of meters deep into the ground along with dense smoke, burning all the sand and soil in its way into a puddle of pitch-black lava. In the blink of an eye, apart from a little bit of soil on the ground that was still intact, the rock stratum beneath the main hall had been destroyed into a complete mess, and the grass on the ground had withered and died. At that moment, Wu Qi had sensed that something was amiss, so he had left the wooden city. Su Fu frowned and paced around the hall for a while. Only then did he feel reassured and nodded his head, clasping his hands behind his back and walking towards the banquet hall. At this moment, Yingjing's living hall looked exactly the same on the surface, but in fact, it had been badly damaged to the core. Many maidservants hurriedly ran back and forth, replacing the tools that were riddled with holes. They were extremely busy. Wu Qi was running very fast, and whenever something went wrong, he would immediately flee out of the city. However, although he was running fast, Su Fu's attack was even faster and more brutal. As a result, his escape beam was still swept by a thread of poisonous flame and dark smoke that burst out from the Earth's core. A large red mark was left on his right calf, and a thread of heat poison went straight into his internal organs. If it were any other ordinary cultivator, this heat poison that had been nurtured by the Earth's core for tens of thousands of years would be a huge problem. However, with a slight movement of the false core in Wu Qi's fire meridians, it absorbed all the heat poison, transforming it into innate fire energies that circulated throughout his body. Although Wu Qi was cultivating with a special technique that made him immune to the heat poison, his right calf was still burning with a burning pain. On top of that, he was nearly riddled with holes by the bizarre black needles. Wu Qi was so angry that his eyebrows were twitching, and he kept pointing his finger in the direction of the wooden city. Old fool Su Fu, the energy essence in your Dharma eyes will be taken by me, Wu Qi. Not only the energy essence in your eyes, but also the mystic technique of primordial runes you are cultivating, they will also belong to me, Wu Qi. This was the field headquarters of Qin army. Not only were there several 100,000 elite soldiers stationed here, it was also guarded by a large number of cultivators. Li Si, Su Fu, Yingjing, and a few others were all almighty experts with astonishing cultivation base. Therefore, Wu Qi dared not to underestimate Su Fu, and he dared not to strike hastily. He only had one chance to strike, and once he failed and alerted the others in the field headquarters, it would be very difficult for Wu Qi to escape. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi sneered and left the field headquarters, plunging into a nearby mountain. For the next 3 days, Wu Qi was running around in the woods in a hurry, purposely searching for those dark, desolate, damp and filthy corners that were densely covered with poisonous mist and miasma. He had no idea how many strange and bizarre poisonous bugs he had caught, and how many strange poisonous herbs he had harvested. The scroll of stealing contained all kinds of knowledge, and it contained all kinds of strange and rare knockout agents and poisons. It was reasonable, as the secret chambers of those heaven immortals, gold immortals, and almighty experts would be guarded by their loyal disciples, divine beasts, and immortal beasts that they had tamed. Although the stealing technique of the scroll of stealing was the strongest under the heaven, it did not mean that their cultivation base was the strongest under the heaven. Most likely, the cultivation base of these disciples, divine beasts and immortal beasts was much higher than Wu Qi himself. On top of that, cultivators would never fall asleep. Usually, they would sit in a meditative state for hundreds or even thousands of years. Under such circumstances, if Wu Qi wanted to sneak into the secret chambers and steal something, he would need all kinds of knockout agents and poisons. Among all the knockout agents recorded in the scroll of stealing, the one that Wu Qi could successfully concoct was the drunken dragon incense, which had over 780 formulas. There was a magical herb named drunken dragon grass under the heaven. Even if an ancient divine dragon were to consume it, he would be drunk for 1,000 years and lose consciousness. The drunken dragon incense mimicked the medicinal strength of the drunken dragon grass, combining all kinds of weaker herbs into one, and concocting a very powerful and overbearing knockout agent. In the scroll of stealing, the drunken dragon incense was ranked as the 9th tier of immortal grade among all the knockout agents in the universe, and was ranked 7th. It was one of the most common and commonly used knockout agents. Therefore, the number of formulas for drunken dragon incense was the highest, over 700 of them. After spending 3 days, Wu Qi was lucky enough to find all the poisonous weeds and poisonous bugs that could be concocted with 3 different formulas of drunken dragon incense. Carefully, according to the formulas, he processed all the poisonous weeds and poisonous bugs one by one, and finally concocted 3 different formulas of drunken dragon incense, then made them into 3 tiny threads. There was no conflict between the 3 formulas of drunken dragon incense, and they could be used at the same time. When the medicinal strength was stacked together, according to the description in the scroll of stealing, even an immortal or immortal beast of 36th tier heaven immortal realm would be knocked down to the ground after smelling it. Although it was not the strongest formula of drunken dragon incense, for the current Wu Qi, it was more than enough. The result of 3 days of hard work was 3 tiny threads of pale pinkish color, as thin as a mung bean, and measuring only 3 inches long. Wu Qi weighed the threads of drunken dragon incense in his hand, then let out a strange laugh. Without wasting any more time, he exercised his escape art once again and returned to Qin Army's field headquarters. When the night fell, Yingjing and all his ministers once again held a grand banquet. Wu Qi waited until the banquet was over, then watched as all the people returned to their respective palaces to rest. It was obvious that Yingjing had drunk too much today, as he was in high spirits. Wearing his helmet and armor, he brought 1,000 Yulin army and patrolled around the field headquarters for over 2 hours. Only when the moon was hanging high up in the sky did he return to Mu City, accompanied by Su Fu and Li Si. After Yingzheng settled down in the Great Hall and began to circulate his energy, only then did Li Si and Su Fu quietly leave Yingzheng's bedchamber. Outside the Great Hall, Li Si and Su Fu exchanged a glance, then went their separate ways with an expressionless face, entering two small side halls on the left and right side of Yingzheng's bedchamber. It was obvious that the relationship between Li Si and Su Fu was not very good. One was the leader of all the ministers, and the other was the leader of all the close ministers. It would be strange if they had a good relationship. Looking at the stiff relationship between Li Si and Su Fu, Wu Qi nodded his head silently. Carefully he retracted all his aura, and before Su Fu entered the side hall, Wu Qi lit up 3 drunken dragon incense sticks in the largest and most spacious bedroom. Then, he carefully inserted the 3 incense sticks into the corner of the bedroom, then immediately plunged into the ground. The tasteless and odorless drunken dragon incense quickly spread and enveloped the entire bedroom. Outside the bedroom, Su Fu gave a few instructions to a few practitioners, then sent them away. After that, he clasped his hands behind his back and walked into the bedroom with a gloomy face. The door behind him moved on its own even though there was no wind, and quietly closed behind him. Frowning, Su Fu strode to the bed in the middle of the bedroom, took off his outer robe, and slowly sat down on the bed. A green gleam flickered in Su Fu's eyes as he sneered and said, "Li Si, how dare you tell His Majesty that you've found the location of a demon flood dragon, and that His Majesty can hunt it and complete the first stage of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic? If I allow you to make such a great contribution, wouldn't my position in His Majesty's heart become weaker? Last time, I was the one who reported to His Majesty about that demon dragon." Shaking his head, Su Fu sighed and said, "I've caused His Majesty to be injured, and caused him to lose a lot of soldiers and generals. Although His Majesty doesn't take it to heart, if Li Si makes a new contribution, it will make him lose a lot of strength. Damn it, I've asked those useless fools to keep an eye on Li Si, but how could I let him find the demon flood dragon?" After muttering a few words in a low voice, Su Fu's eyes suddenly rolled up without any warning, and he fell heavily on the bed with his back to the sky. The back of his head knocked against the side of the bed, creating a loud and clear clang. It was a very shocking sound. However, as the bedroom was sealed by Su Fu with primordial runes, not a single sound could be heard from inside. Although there were several hundred black-robed practitioners on night duty outside, none of them knew what had happened inside. Hastily, Wu Qi leaped out from the ground and leaped onto Su Fu's body. Without saying anything, he unleashed all the restrictive spells he could from the scroll of stealing on Su Fu, sealing all the acupoints, meridians, spiritual ocean, dantian, and many other parts of Su Fu's body. Using both hands, Wu Qi pushed Su Fu's eyes open, brought himself before Su Fu's face, and aimed at Su Fu's eyes with his own. The mystic technique was activated. Suddenly, an extremely tiny and bright green whirlpool shone from the depth of Su Fu's eyes. A wisp of energy essence shot out from Su Fu's eyes at an incredible speed, shooting into Wu Qi's eyes like a misty smoke. A faint green gleam shot out from Wu Qi's eyes. The blood-red gleam in his eyes swelled up one after another, making his eyes as huge as a bull's, and nearly popping out from their sockets. Su Fu had cultivated his Dharma eyes for many years, and the energy essence contained in them was extremely huge. Although Wu Qi had only absorbed the energy essence for the span of 3 breaths, his eyes had nearly exploded, as they could no longer withstand the influx of energy essence. After stopping the mystic technique, Wu Qi stored the absorbed energy essence into the depth of his eyes. After that, he quickly removed the only storage ring from Su Fu's body, as well as some talismans made from some special materials hidden in his sleeves and belt. Using his divine sense, he gave the storage ring a glance and found 33 jade scrolls in it, with the word script of ancient law written on them. Countless abstruse runes could be vaguely seen on the surface of these jade scrolls. Obviously, these were the scriptures for the cultivation of primordial runes. Wu Qi was struck with great joy. Without hesitation, he transferred all the items in the ring into his own storage ring, then pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf and thrust it forward. In just a blink of an eye, the sword had reached Su Fu's heart. Chapter 168. When the sword of Greedy Wolf was about to kill Su Fu, Wu Qi suddenly recalled the description of the practitioners in Scroll of Stealing. He quickly retracted the sword, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead due to the fear. Carefully, he untied Su Fu's shirt and sure enough, he saw that his body was densely covered with several tens of thousands of strange runes the size of mung beans. These runes were twisting and roaring like some living creatures. Just by looking at them, Wu Qi could sense an extremely ferocious and brutal aura coming at him. This was the Blood Soul Curse. The deeper a practitioner studied into the primordial runes, the stronger the Blood Soul Curse would be. If a practitioner was killed by someone, the person who killed him or her would have to face the cruel revenge of the Blood Soul Curse. If this Blood Soul Curse was triggered by burning the practitioner's soul, the power of the Blood Soul Curse would be at least 100 times stronger than a full force strike from the practitioner. As Su Fu had formed his nascent soul, a full force strike from him was more than enough to turn Wu Qi's body and soul into nothingness. Cold sweat was breaking out from Wu Qi's body. When he thought of how he almost killed Su Fu, and how he was almost tricked by Su Fu's curse of blood soul, his heart was twitching and his legs were weak. The Blood Soul Curse was an extremely mystical curse, and it would never fail to take revenge on the murderer. Even if Wu Qi threw Su Fu into the nest of venomous bugs and let him be devoured by millions upon millions of them, the Blood Soul Curse would only be unleashed on Wu Qi. Faced with the densely packed curse runes on Su Fu's body, Wu Qi was like a hungry wolf who had seen a porcupine. Although he had the desire to kill Su Fu, he could not do it. The Tao of primordial runes was bizarre and ferocious, possessing an unpredictable power. Therefore, Wu Qi dared not to kill Su Fu. Flustered and exasperated, Wu Qi stared at Su Fu's body for a long while. Clenching his teeth, he raised up the sword of Greedy Wolf, but in the end, he still put it down. It was not worth risking his life. However, Wu Qi was unwilling to let Su Fu go just like that. Needless to say, Su Fu would be a formidable enemy of Great Yan Dynasty in the future, and he would also be a formidable enemy of Wu Qi. If they could kill him now, the pressure that Daqin would face on Great Yan Dynasty in the future would be greatly reduced. With a soft sigh, Wu Qi sheathed his sword and put away the 3 half-burned incense sticks. Placing the incense stick on his palm, Wu Qi sprayed out a stream of true flame, turning all the incense stick into a wisp of thick smoke. Carefully, Wu Qi stuffed the smoke into Su Fu's mouth. With the thick smoke as a foundation, Su Fu would not be able to wake up for at least 3 months. Grabbing Su Fu, Wu Qi plunged into the ground with him. For hours later, Wu Qi brought Su Fu and arrived at the bottom of the huge river. Amidst the rolling waves, Wu Qi brought Su Fu along with him, drifting westward along the river. After traveling for over 3,000 miles with the current, Wu Qi found a water nest, which was occupied by a huge demon carp underneath a patch of black rocks in the middle of the river. It was an underwater nest with an entrance of 30 feet in circumference, but tens of miles in size inside. On top of that, there was a front hall, a side hall, a bedroom, and a backyard. Obviously, this demon carp had spent quite a lot of effort in building this place. However, this demon carp was just a demon carp that was about to form its Jin Dan. Although it had developed its own intelligence, Wu Qi did not pay any attention to it. Then, he used a sword beam to kill the demon black carp, storing its huge body as food. After that, he sealed off the entrance of the cave and deployed a few formations that could conceal his aura. After that, he began to drain all the water in the cave abode. As he was not in the mood to take care of the cave, Wu Qi threw the unconscious Su Fu to the ground, then sat down next to him. Immediately, he began to temper his eyes according to the technique of the mystic eyes of universe. He kept performing one bizarre incantation gesture after another. His eyes were shrouded in a bizarre mist, and in just a blink of an eye, his eyes were covered with a strange glow, which he could not tell what color it was, but it seemed to contain 7 different colors at the same time. The mystic eyes of universe was an ancient divine technique. It was said that once mastered, one would be able to see through the entire 9 heavens and 10 earths. Wherever the divine eyes looked, they could see through all illusions and formations, and would not be confused by any bewitching magic. However, the cost of cultivating the mystic eyes of universe was enormous. It required all kinds of acquired spirit treasures and innate spirit essences to fuse into the eyes, constantly tempering them. Every time a spirit essence was fused into the eyes, the power would increase by one level, and the increase in power was nearly endless. At this moment, while Wu Qi was digesting the spirit essences he absorbed from Su Fu's eyes, he also fused the innate energies of 5 elements into his eyes, which gave his eyes the ability to attack with innate 5 elements. Then he separated a thread of energy from the body of the 7 holy deities and devils, fusing it with his eyes, giving his eyes the ability to attack with the mind. In the future, when his eyes were strong enough, he could also fuse the innate divine flame, such as the divine flame of order, into his eyes. With that, his eyes would be able to shoot out the divine flame of order to attack his enemies, which would make the power even greater, mysterious, and unpredictable. 6 hours later, the spirit essences he absorbed from Su Fu's eyes were completely digested by Wu Qi's eyes. His eyes, which had a clear distinction between black and white, were now glinting brighter and brighter. The white of his eyes looked like silver, while his pupils looked like black crystals. The contrast between black and white was extremely sharp, emanating a sharp aura that no one could look straight at. The medicinal strength of the drunken dragon incense could not keep Su Fu unconscious for a long period of time. As time was limited, Wu Qi did not waste any time. He pried open Su Fu's eyes and absorbed a thread of spirit essences into his own eyes. This time, Wu Qi's eyes had gone through a tremendous change, as the amount of spirit essences they could hold was at least 10 times greater than before. After that, he spent over 4 hours to completely digest this thread of spirit essences. Half a month later, Su Fu's green eyes had turned dim and lifeless. His Dharma Eye's divine ability had been destroyed by Wu Qi, and all the years of arduous cultivation had gone down the drain. On the other hand, Wu Qi's eyes were glowing with a strange gleam, with layers upon layers of clouds constantly changing within them, becoming extremely profound and abstruse. The mystic eyes of universe was even more mysterious and mystical than Su Fu's yin and yang Dharma eyes. Currently, when Wu Qi stared with his eyes, his gaze could pierce through the surface of the river and look at the sky over 100 miles high. The strange gleam in his eyes swept across the ground. Wherever the gleam passed through, the sand and soil 3,000 feet deep would turn as clear as water. All sorts of bugs living in the sand and the strange beasts living underground could no longer hide from Wu Qi's eyes. What was even more miraculous was that, wherever Wu Qi's eyes passed through, all the natural energies contained in everything would be glistening brightly in his line of sight. According to the nature and quality of the natural energies, they would be of varying brightness and darkness. Wu Qi's eyes had nearly become the best appraisal instrument. With just a single glance, he could see through any ordinary precious treasures produced by the heaven and earth. After throwing his head back and letting out 3 loud laughs into the sky, expressing the boundless joy in his heart, Wu Qi took out the script of ancient law. The word ancient represented the meaning of the primordial era, while the word law represented the meaning of the Tao of the heaven and earth. The script of ancient law was a scripture that recorded the research of the primordial magicians on the nature, their understanding of the heaven and earth, and the laws of the heaven and earth. From the most basic energy of the 5 elements of the heaven and earth, to the most abstruse laws of life and death, and the Tao of yin and yang, all of them were described in detail in these 33 jade scrolls. Wu Qi briefly flipped through the script of ancient law. The Tao of primordial runes recorded in this scripture could allow a mortal to cultivate all the way to the realm of heaven immortal. After reaching the realm of heaven immortal, it would be a blank slate. However, with the foundation of the Tao of primordial runes, Wu Qi would be able to study and cultivate the book of ancient God found in Scroll of Stealing. It was a primordial scripture that could allow one to cultivate all the way from the realm of heaven immortal, pointing straight to the origin of the world. The Book of Ancient God was a true cultivation scripture of primordial treasure grade, and the script of ancient law was the key to unlock this secret treasure. After comparing the various runes and mystic techniques found in the Book of Ancient God with the script of Ancient Law, Wu Qi could not help but let out a loud laugh once again. The sword technique of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect was a magical technique used to fight against cultivators using flying swords and magical treasures, while the script of Ancient Law and Book of Ancient God were divine abilities and mystic techniques that could allow one to establish one's life and see through the secrets of the heaven. If a cultivator wished to have a great achievement, both magical techniques and divine abilities were indispensable. Now, Wu Qi did not lack any magical techniques or divine abilities, and he even had the solid foundation laid by the scroll of stealing. How could he not be happy? It was different from the cultivation technique of ordinary qi refining cultivators. Ordinary qi refining cultivators collected natural energies, tempered their corporeal bodies and bones, accumulated innate energies, and formed their Jin Dan nascent souls. On the other hand, the practitioners who studied the Tao of primordial runes did not attach much importance to their corporeal bodies. What they focused on was comprehending the secrets of the heaven and earth, strengthening the source of their soul, strengthening their nascent divinity and divine sense, and communicating with the heaven and earth with the powerful soul energy. That was why they could topple the mountains and overturn the seas, and change the stars with just a single rune. In other words, cultivators cultivated their qi, while practitioners cultivated their spirit. Both sides had their own emphasis, and each had their own advantages and disadvantages. Now that Wu Qi was cultivating both his qi and spirit, even he himself did not have an exact estimation on how many benefits it could bring him. In any case, Wu Qi began to cultivate the script of Ancient Law, and began to study all kinds of runes and mystic techniques. After he had fused with Li Xiaobai's soul particles, his abnormal IQ had played a great role. Ordinary magicians might not be able to comprehend the runes even if they tried to comprehend them for several years, but he only needed 2 to 3/4 of an hour to comprehend them. The most difficult part of studying the Tao of primordial runes was that it required one to gather a very powerful soul energy. The stronger the soul, the faster one could comprehend the runes, and the more powerful the offensive power of the runes would be. Without spending a long period of time, it was impossible to form a powerful soul. However, Wu Qi still had Su Fu, a human-shaped great tonic right next to him. Using the silver lotus as the medium, Wu Qi forcibly split Su Fu's soul with the divine flame of order, refining the source of his soul into the most basic soul particles and fusing it with his own soul. With that, the cultivation of his soul progressed at a tremendous pace. In just a few days, his soul had become about 10 times stronger than before. Only the pitiful Su Fu was left. Day and night, he had to suffer the pain of soul refinement by the divine flame of order, and from time to time, his soul would be cut by the silver lotus. The pain made him twitch and jerk like a fish out of the water, slapping the ground and producing loud popping noises. Another month later, 70% of Su Fu's soul energy had been refined and absorbed by Wu Qi. At the same time, Su Fu was almost at the end of his rope. If he continued to refine his soul energy, it was highly possible that his soul would be completely destroyed, and the curse of blood soul in his body would be triggered immediately, giving a deadly blow to Wu Qi. Left with no other choice, Wu Qi finally gave up on Su Fu. Looking at Su Fu, whose body had shrunk to one size, Wu Qi stuffed a few life-saving spirit pills into his mouth. After that, he sneakily sent Su Fu back to the field headquarters of Qin Army, which was a few times more heavily guarded than before. After sending Su Fu back to his bedroom, Wu Qi snuck out from the Qin Army's campsite stealthily. After that, he threw his head back and roared into the sky, "Li Si, the Prime Minister of Great Qin, I send my greetings to your mother." Then he pointed his right hand out and waved it, unleashing a rune that twisted and looked like a lightning bolt, falling forcefully into the sky above the Qin camp. Suddenly, thousands of tiny electric arcs shot down from the pitch-black sky. Countless thunderbolts streaked across the sky above the Qin camp, and immediately, the surroundings were thrown into chaos. From the wooden city located right in the center of the field headquarters, the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent soared up into the sky, while Ying Zhang's loud cry shook the surrounding mountains and caused half of them to crumble. How dare you insult me, the Daqin? Wu Qi had long fled over 100 miles away from the scene. He stood on the peak of a lofty mountain, looking at the mountains that were crumbling crazily around the field headquarters of Daqin. Suddenly, he let out a long and sonorous cry, which sounded like a thunderclap and echoed out to a distance of several hundred miles. Li Si, I'll fight you to the death. Chapter 169. Inside the cave, a strange gleam flashed across Wu Qi's eyes as he slowly breathed out a long sigh of relief. It had been 7 days since he sent Su Fu back. During these 7 days, the Qin army was like a swarm of hornets whose nest had been burned, searching for the enemy in every direction. They had thrown the woods several thousand miles in circumference into a complete mess, and countless barbarian villages were discovered by the furious Qin army. All the barbarians were slaughtered, and all their belongings were looted. The sky was filled with smoke and dust during these few days. It was the thick smoke that rose from the burning of the barbarian villages and the nearby woods. During these 7 days, Wu Qi had concocted a few new drunken dragon incense, trying to give the leaders of the Qin army a hard lesson. If possible, he even wanted to get some benefits from Ying Zheng. But too bad, the higher-ups of the Qin army who had increased their vigilance did not give him any chance. Ying Zheng and his men were all carrying various dust-repelling and poison-repelling pearls, so the smoke of the drunken dragon incense could not even touch their bodies. Therefore it was useless. Wu Qi had also tried to poison the wine and dishes, but as Ying Zheng and his men had attained the cultivation base of nascent soul realm, they simply refused to eat, drink, or breathe. No matter what strange and bizarre methods Wu Qi used, he still could not do anything to them. There was one time when Wu Qi sneaked into Li Si's bedroom and poisoned the tea. As a result, he was nearly ambushed by the army led by Ying Zheng and captured alive. Fortunately, when Wu Qi realized that something was not right, he immediately fled underground, and that was how he managed to escape from the disaster. After that incident, Wu Qi dared not to enter the Qin army's field headquarters again. He could only patrol around and see if he could find an opportunity to strike. In the end, after he ambushed a few small detachments of Qin army and looted a batch of energy stones, the Qin army simply shut themselves in and refused to come out, guarding the entire field headquarters so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Such a shameless method had left Wu Qi with no idea what to do. He could only look at the Qin army's field headquarters and smile bitterly into the sky. The moonlight was bright and beautiful tonight, and a round moon hung high up in the sky. The moonlight on this day was exceptionally dazzling. The greenish-white moonlight poured down from the basin-sized moon like flowing water, sprinkling the cool moonlight essence on people's bodies. Wu Qi walked out of the cave he was hiding in and took a deep breath. Thick smoke, a large amount of dust, and the cool essence of the moon were sucked into his body. Wu Qi coughed violently. Standing at the top of the mountain and looking around, there were big and small fires everywhere. The forest was burning, and the fire made the moonlight in the sky dim. The army of Qin had been wreaking havoc in all directions these days. Red flames were reflected in the sky, giving the heaven and earth an aura of doomsday, as if a calamity was about to descend. Shaking his head, Wu Qi's body turned into a beam of yellow light and drilled into the ground. During the past few days, many forests in the surrounding had been burned down. Without the cover of trees and flowers, he could not use the escape art of innate wood element. Thus, the escape art of earth had become the only choice for Wu Qi. Cautiously, he poked half of his head out from the edge of the Qin army's campsite. Then, Wu Qi saw a chariot pulled by 8 black horses coming out from the main entrance of the Qin army's campsite, and the man standing on the chariot was none other than Ying Zheng. The chariot was driven by 3 burly warriors, each standing 10 feet tall with their upper bodies bared. Each of them had a skin that looked like it was forged from bronze, glinting with a cold gleam under the moonlight. Standing next to Ying Zheng on the left was Li Si, whose face had turned green, and on the right was Su Fu, who looked haggard and had his vitality severely damaged. During the past few days, Wu Qi had been harassing the Qin army's campsite, saying that he was going to seek revenge from Li Si. Because of this, Ying Zheng flew into a terrible rage, scolding Li Si a few times in front of all his ministers. Even Bai Qitian, who had offended Wu Qi, was implicated by Ying Zheng as well. How could Li Si, who swore confidently that he had killed Wu Qi, have a pleasant expression on his face? Su Fu, on the other hand, had his Dharma I energy essence completely seized by Wu Qi, and 70% of his soul source energy was seized by Wu Qi. But at this moment, there was a faint green gleam shining in Su Fu's eyes, and his face looked slightly flushed. It looked like he had actually recovered a small part of his lost energy. A greedy gleam shone in Wu Qi's eyes, and he gave Su Fu a fierce glare. Obviously, Ying Zheng had spent a great deal of his capital, using some kind of rare and precious natural treasures to restore Su Fu's lost energy essence, strengthening Su Fu's foundation, and that was why Su Fu was able to recover his cultivation base in just a short 7 days. Surely, Ying Zheng had some good stuff with him. Wu Qi frowned, wondering how he could get his hands on these treasures. Apart from Ying Zheng and his men who were riding on the chariot, there were 400 black-robed practitioners accompanying them, and each of them had the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. There were also 800 Yulin army and stalwart tiger army from Daqin dynasty, all of whom had the overall strength of Jin Dan realm. Among these black-robed practitioners, there were several dozens of them who emanated an aura that made Wu Qi feel fear. They should be earth immortals of nascent soul realm. Meanwhile, standing in front of those Yulin army and stalwart tiger army were nearly 100 captains. Each of them looked very valiant, and the aura emanating from them was so strong that it made Wu Qi's hair stand on end. Among them, the general who stood closest to Ying Zheng's chariot was riding on a double-horned white qilin. According to what Wu Qi had seen and heard in the last few days when he sneaked into the Qin army's campsite, he was the current Grand Marshal of Daqin dynasty, Wang Baiqi of Wuhan City. Standing 9 feet tall, Baiqi's skin was slightly dark, and he had a square face that gave him an imposing aura. He was clad in 3 layers of heavy armor, all of which were rare mid-grade magical treasures, and possessed an amazing defensive strength. Following right beside Baiqi were his sons, Bai Qitian, the commander of Yulin army chariot, and Bai Qiming, the commander of stalwart tiger chariot. What a valiant and arrogant army! Wu Qi shook his head. He had no idea if Great Yan dynasty still had some hidden trump cards. However, judging by the military strength displayed by Daqin today, just these 100 earth immortals of nascent soul realm were more than enough to wipe out Great Yan. Unless Great Yan dynasty had enough hidden forces, once Ying Zheng left Meng Mountains and came to Great Yan's territory, the fate of Great Yan dynasty would be hanging by a thread. Sai, don't worry about the ancient people. Yan Dan was killed by Daqin once, and I don't think he will mind if he dies again. I just want to protect the people I care about. The faces of Meng Xiaobai, Lu Qingfeng, and Princess Zhang Le flashed before Wu Qi's eyes. Wu Qi twitched his lips, exercised an escape art, and caught up with Ying Zheng and his company, who were leaving the campsite in the middle of the night. The army marched through the woods at a fast speed. Cast by those practitioners, a thin layer of cloud had shrouded the army, preventing them from making any sound when they were marching. No matter if it was a cliff or a deep valley, the army could just fly past them without encountering any obstacle. In just over 2 hours, when it was almost midnight, Ying Zheng and his company came to the bank of the Great River, and traveled along the Great River for over 6,000 miles eastward. The Great River had fused with the water from 3 other tributaries here, and as the 3 tributaries flowed into the Great River almost at the same place, the water area here was very wide, and a huge lake with a circumference of nearly 3,000 miles was formed amidst the mountains. Standing on the peak of a lofty mountain, Wu Qi looked down at the lake. The main stream of the Great River was like a great dragon, rushing from east to west, while the 3 smaller tributaries were like 3 great serpents that plunged over from the distant horizon, plunging into the embrace of the great dragon. As the 4 tributaries collided with each other, the current of the lake was extremely treacherous. Even though there was no wind blowing, there were still several tens of feet tall waves rocking, and there were even whirlpools that could be vaguely seen under the surface of the water, producing loud crashing noises from time to time. At this moment, The moon was about to rise to the center of the sky, and it was almost midnight. Suddenly, the surface of the lake began to sparkle as countless aquatic demon beasts, such as fishes, shrimps, crabs, and many others, came out from under the water and floated on the surface, opening their mouths and staring blankly at the sky, waiting to absorb the essence that was sprinkled down from the full moon when the moon rose to the center of the sky, which could transform all demon beasts thoroughly. The night of the full moon was an extremely important moment for all demon beasts, and none of them would want to miss out on this day. From a dense forest halfway up a lofty mountain, Ing Zheng's voice was heard faintly coming. Last month, because of the disappearance of Su Fu, the field headquarters was thrown into chaos, and that's why we couldn't come here to capture that flood dragon. Tonight, we can't afford to fail. Once I've subdued that flood dragon and attained the first stage of the 9 Dragons Cauldron Heaven cultivation technique, I'll be able to attain the righteous fruit of Heaven Immortal, and all of you will be credited with your contribution. As for that little rascal who has been harassing the field headquarters for the past few days, once I've accomplished the task, I'll definitely crush his bones and scatter his ashes, and wipe out his entire clan. A mountain breeze came blowing from the surface of the lake, and Wu Qi felt a cool breeze coming from all over his body while lying on a rock. His ears and eyes were very sharp now, and Ing Zheng's voice was very loud and clear. Therefore, he could hear every single word clearly. Suddenly, he recalled the day when he kidnapped Su Fu. Did Su Fu say that Li Si had found a flood dragon? The cultivation technique cultivated by Ing Zheng required the blood essence and soul of a flood dragon as a supplement. It looked like they had suffered a loss in the hands of a demon dragon of Heaven Immortal realm, and today, they were going to find this flood dragon to vent their anger. Ing Zheng was going to break through the realm of Heaven Immortal with the help of the flood dragon's power? Wu Qi shook his head. How could he let such a good thing succeed? But, what should he do to ruin Ing Zheng's plan? Wu Qi could not help but frown as he watched Bai Qi instruct all the soldiers to deploy a formation on the mountainside that was emanating a murderous aura, and saw those black-robed practitioners deploy many vicious restrictive spells on the mountainside. Step by step, the moon was sliding toward the middle of the sky, and the number of demon beasts on the surface of the lake was increasing. The stronger the demon beasts were, the later they would appear. The stronger the demon beasts were, the larger their bodies were. Therefore, the demon beasts that appeared now were rising up from the surface of the water like small hills, causing the already billowing surface of the lake to become even more turbulent. Huge waves kept slapping onto the huge rocks on the shore, and the rumbling of the waves could be vaguely heard from over 1,000 miles away. Right at the moment when the moon was about to reach the center of the sky, a giant catfish, over 3,000 feet long, suddenly leaped out from under the water, and with a single swipe of its tail, it smashed 2 demon crabs, a male and a female demon crabs. Both crabs measured over 100 feet in circumference, and they were demon immortals with a very profound cultivation base. But with a swipe of the giant tail of the catfish, their tough bodies were crushed into pieces like tofu. Originally, catfish had a smooth and sticky body and no scales. However, when this fierce catfish leaped out from the water, its body was densely covered with a layer of black scales the size of a water tank. Furthermore, they were pentagonal scales that were very different from ordinary fish scales, and the edge of the scales was inlaid with a tiny golden edge, which gave it a very beautiful appearance. The long whiskers on the corner of the catfish's mouth were 6 flood dragon whiskers, each 1,000 feet long and glittering as if they were made from pure silver. There was also a dragon horn on the top of its head, a pitch-black dragon horn that looked like the antlers of a deer, crystal clear and divided into 8 forks. When this giant catfish leaped out from the water, gusts of chilly wind immediately rose from all directions, and a thick layer of watery clouds wrapped around its body, with lightning flashing vaguely in the clouds. Lying on the dark clouds, the catfish raised its upper body and faced the moon lazily. Then, it suddenly opened its mouth and took a deep breath towards the moon. Half of the moonlight on the surface of the lake, which measured 3,000 miles in circumference, was sucked up by this catfish. All the other demon beasts roared and roared crazily, cursing furiously at the catfish, then left the catfish angrily. If they could not absorb even a tiny bit of moonlight when they were around it, wouldn't that be a waste of an opportunity? However, the catfish did not pay any attention to the protests of the other demon beasts. It just kept absorbing the moonlight essence in the sky comfortably, while a bright glow flashed and flickered around its body. Suddenly, 4 dragon claws poked out from underneath its body, grabbing wildly in all directions while producing swishing noises. 2 huge water snakes, each measuring over 100 feet long, were caught by its claws and swallowed into its stomach without even chewing. Wu Qi's eyes lit up when he saw this. What a ferocious and powerful flood dragon. However, it was really rare to see a flood dragon transformed from a catfish, and its appearance was really strange. He gave a malicious look at Ying Zheng, who stood halfway up the mountain not far away. "Catfish, are you going to take me or not?" Chapter 170. Wu Qi stared greedily at the catfish flood dragon's body. If he could obtain a part of her blood essence, the benefits he could get would be greater than what Shi Tianma and his son could give him. Abruptly, the catfish flood dragon opened her mouth, which measured several hundred feet in circumference, and thrust towards Ying Zheng with a frightening suction force. The surrounding air and the lake water turned into several dozens of waterspouts, rolling and rolling into the catfish flood dragon's mouth. For a moment, a strong gust of wind roared across the surface of the lake, while catfish flood dragon's eyes shone with an eerie blue gleam. Like 2 searchlights, they penetrated through the watery mist for several miles and locked onto Ying Zheng's body. Ying Zheng let out a complacent laugh, then waved the long spear in his hand and smashed it down towards the catfish flood dragon's head. Far away on the surface of the lake, the catfish flood dragon had absorbed the essence of the full moon tonight, and had eaten 2 large dark fishes to fill her belly. She was now excitedly flipping her body on the surface of the lake, exposing her white and plump belly to the moonlight. Her 4 claws were gently scratching her belly, producing deep, muffled noises that sounded like the rumbling of thunder. The noises could be heard thousands of miles away, and all the demon beasts on the surface of the lake dared not to make any noise. Meanwhile, Catfish Flood Dragon had given up on Bai Qi and the others. She opened her big mouth and sprayed out countless pitch-black water in thunders, smashing towards Ying Zheng's face. Then she coiled her body and charged towards Ying Zheng. At the same time, the Catfish Flood Dragon roared out loud, "All of you, attack. These are all nascent soul cultivators who have cultivated to the realm of Earth immortal. Eat their flesh and blood, and it will greatly nourish your energy. It belongs to whoever gets it. Whoever kills the most people will be the second leader of the Lake of Four Waters. She should have the appearance of a dragon. She should be one of those vigorous, divine, mighty, and graceful divine dragons." He, Ying Zheng, was cultivating the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, so what was the meaning of having a catfish swimming behind his back? Was it the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic? If this was spread out, it would be a joke. Ying Zheng pondered for a long while, but still could not make up his mind. Should he kill the Catfish Flood Dragon and become a heaven immortal, or should he wait a little longer and find a flood dragon with a graceful body, whose appearance was almost the same as a true dragon? Su Fu's face fell, and just when he was about to explain to Li Si, Ying Zheng snorted displeasedly and said, "Enough! Shut up!" Near and far, countless demon beasts let out earth-shattering roars simultaneously. Innumerable strange aquatic beasts rolled up endless waves, rushing towards Ji Hao and Ji Hao. Among these aquatic beasts, several dozens of them had an aura comparable to that of Earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and over 2,000 large fishes, prawns, and other demon beasts had an aura comparable to that of human immortals of Jin Dan. Although the other aquatic beasts weren't as strong, they were still huge in size. Their brute strength and innate abilities were also not to be underestimated. Wu Qi was also dumbfounded. Legend has it that pythons could transform into flood dragons, and carps could transform into dragons. This was the heaven and earth's love for them, so their chances of transforming into flood dragons were much higher than ordinary creatures, and it was also much easier. As the sacred emperor who founded the Deqin dynasty, carrying a catfish on his back, this was really. Ying Zheng's brows were locked in a tight frown, and he could not make up his mind for a long while. Li Si straightened his back, stared at Su Fu with a bright gleam in his eyes, and said in a cold voice, Su Fu, it is true that I didn't eliminate the root of the problem, and that's why you were kidnapped. But, as the leader of His Majesty's close courtiers, the imperial advisor of the Qin dynasty, you were actually kidnapped by a junior. How can you blame me, Li Si, for this? You don't feel ashamed of this scandal, but do you think you have the capital to attack Li Si? If he were to cultivate into a heaven immortal with the help of this catfish flood dragon's blood essence and soul, for a very long period of time in the future, whenever he used the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic to fight with someone, the shadow of a flood dragon manifested in the dark mist behind his back would take the form of a strange, fat catfish. Suddenly, the catfish flood dragon stopped patting her belly. Slowly, she turned her body, raised her head and looked at Ying Zheng. She stared at Ying Zheng with her 2 big eyes for a long while, then suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, You little thing, what are you talking about? You want me to offer you my soul and blood essence? You alone? TSK, your little size is not even enough to fill the gap between my teeth. The space between the catfish flood dragon and Ying Zheng had turned into a frightening storm of thunderclouds. Dark clouds were rocking and rocking between them, and countless thunderbolts were producing deafening rumbles. Lightning bolts as thick as a water tank kept striking out from the thunderclouds, lighting up the entire lake 3,000 miles in circumference, making the figures of countless demon beasts hiding in Wu Qi's lake water vaguely appear and disappear like ghosts. Bai Qi snorted coldly, cupped his fist and said to Ying Zheng, Your Majesty, regardless of whether it is beautiful or ugly, a flood dragon is a flood dragon. It has the ability to ride on clouds and overturn rivers and seas. A flood dragon is a flood dragon, no matter what it looks like, as long as it is a true dragon. He sneered and said, When your Majesty becomes a heaven immortal and cultivates the first stage of the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, you will be able to sweep across this world. When your Majesty decides what a true dragon looks like, it will be a true dragon. Why should I be afraid of what others think? Those who have any objection will have their entire clan wiped out. Ying Zheng smacked his lips. He looked at Su Fu, then at Li Si, and a flame of fury rose in his heart. Prime Minister, Li Si, you told me that you've found a flood dragon. Good, I like it very much. But, is this the flood dragon you've found? How can this thing be called a flood dragon? Meanwhile, the catfish flood dragon stared furiously at the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent behind Ying Zheng's back. I can't believe you've killed so many flood dragons. No wonder your magic power is so strong. But if you want to deal with me, you can't just rely on magic power. Looking at the long dagger thrust down from Ying Zheng, the catfish flood dragon threw her head back and let out a long cry. Abruptly, her huge tail sprung up and lashed out viciously. The tremendous suction force unleashed by Ying Zheng and catfish flood dragon clashed head-on in midair. Both of them trembled and took a step forward at the same time. Although Ying Zheng's body was hundreds or thousands of times smaller than catfish flood dragon's, and several tens of thousands of times lighter than her, when both of them took a step forward at the same time, it was obvious that Ying Zheng's strength was much stronger than catfish flood dragon. Bai Qi raised his right fist and was about to give the order to attack catfish flood dragon together. But suddenly, Ying Zheng's voice was heard coming from the sky. What a powerful strength! Among all the flood dragons I've killed, you have the strongest fleshly strength. Excellent. After absorbing your blood essence and soul, my fleshly body will definitely reach a state where no magical treasures can harm me. With both hands clasped behind his back, Ying Zheng stood in the middle of the forest, looking over at the catfish flood dragon who was stirring up a storm 100 miles away. His face was filled with uncertainty. Amidst a wild howl that shook the surrounding mountain ridges, Ying Zheng trod on a cloud and flew back at top speed. In just a few seconds, Ying Zheng, who kept coughing blood from his mouth, flew back to the battlefield. He pointed his finger at the catfish flood dragon, who had her eyes and mouth wide open, and cried out, Wonderful! Wonderful! I can't believe that your fleshly body is even stronger than my fleshly body, which has absorbed 8 flood dragons and a great serpent who is about to transform into a flood dragon. You are indeed an extraordinary creature of the heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the catfish flood dragon cried out in pain. Ing Zheng's dagger had left a several hundred feet long and 10 feet wide cut on her tail, nearly splitting it into two. A great amount of pale golden blood sprayed out from her tail, and the pain made her body tremble violently. Immediately she rolled up a wild wind and dark clouds, bringing together countless thunderbolts and bolts as she charged towards Baiqi and the other captains of the Qin dynasty, who were standing in formation. Ing Zheng let out a loud laugh. Suddenly, a plume of dark mist burst out from his back, amidst which the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent were seen twisting and turning. Ing Zheng opened his mouth and inhaled abruptly. A frightening suction force that was a few times stronger than catfish flood dragon's big mouth was produced out of nowhere. Amidst the deafening whistling of the wind, more water tornadoes rolled up from the surface of the lake, while more water was sucked up into the sky. Stronger hurricanes were kicked up, and huge waves tens of feet high rose from the surface of the lake. A great number of aquatic demon beasts could not withstand the tremendous force, and were sucked into the tornadoes, then crushed into pieces by the tremendous pressure. The 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic was a supreme divine ability he learned after he came to this world, a supreme Tao of divinity that cultivated the fleshly body, energy, and soul at the same time. Currently, what he lacked was the blood essence and soul of a flood dragon, which would allow him to form the power of a dragon and step into the realm of heaven immortal. However, the blood essence and soul of the final flood dragon he had absorbed would determine the appearance of the dragon power he had condensed. But for a catfish, Wu Qi had never heard that a catfish could transform into a flood dragon in his entire life. It was not hard to imagine how long it had spent in the process of transforming into a flood dragon, and how many fortuitous encounters it had gone through. Therefore, it was only natural that it had a very strong fleshly body. Ordinary carps and serpents could transform into flood dragons after cultivating painstakingly for 1,000 years, but how much effort did this catfish have to spend to achieve its current strength? 10,000 years? 100,000 years? Perhaps it was even more than that. One could imagine how strong this Dharma body would be after spending several tens of thousands of years to temper its fleshly body. Ing Zheng's eyes lit up. Slowly, a dark mist emanated from his body, and he gave Baiqi a look of appreciation as he said, "King of Wuan knows my mind well. Why should I be afraid of what the people under the heaven think? Anyone who dares to object will be killed. Haha." Throwing his head back and letting out a few wild laughs, Ing Zheng pulled out an ancient colored dagger forged with some strange stone. Then he cast a cloud and brought up a strong wind as he sped towards the catfish flood dragon. Together with several dozens of military officers, Baiqi followed closely behind him, forming a formation capable of both offense and defense, protecting Ing Zheng's left, right, and rear. While laughing, Ing Zheng flew forward and soon came before the catfish flood dragon, who was lying on the surface of the water and drying her belly. He cried out sternly, "You evil creature, quickly offer me your blood essence and soul, and I'll spare you a thread of your soul for reincarnation. After thousands of reincarnations, you will still have a chance to be reborn." Hastily, both men shut their mouths and returned to their wooden expressions, bowing their heads and not saying a word. Then, both men peeked at the catfish flood dragon from the corner of their eyes. Su Fu had a gloating smile on his face, while Li Si was looking at the catfish flood dragon indifferently, his eyes cold and indifferent, as if nothing mattered to him. Su Fu had seen through Ing Zheng's mind, so he kept bowing his head and crossing his arms, refusing to say a word. Li Si was a quick-witted man. He knew that the flood dragon he found was a real flood dragon, and a very powerful one at that. But the appearance of this flood dragon was a little shabby. When he thought that Ing Zheng would take the form of a catfish flood dragon for a long period of time in the future, Li Si carefully bent down and hid behind Ing Zheng's back, not daring to say a word. As Ing Zheng and the catfish flood dragon were crazily sucking the water, a huge amount of lake water kept turning into water tornadoes and flying up into the sky, then being sucked into their bodies. In the blink of an eye, the lake water that entered their bodies was broken down into the tiniest water element by a tremendous force, turning into billowing dark mists and clouds that sprayed out from their bodies, blanketing the void within 1,000 miles in circumference with a dense mist. The water level of the lake kept dropping, and in just a blink of an eye, all the lake water within 100 miles around them had been sucked up into the sky, exposing the pitch-black bottom of the lake, which was densely covered with countless reefs and shells. A loud boom rang out, as the surface of the lake within 200 miles suddenly froze, then shattered into pieces. Countless demon beasts were ripped to shreds by the explosion. Ing Zheng was slapped far away by the huge tail of the catfish flood dragon. Even with Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, which had an incredible eyesight, he could only vaguely see Ing Zheng being slapped up into the sky, piercing through a dozen layers of clouds, and then being blown several hundred miles away by a strong wind that came sweeping across the sky. Looking at the aquatic demon beasts that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, Wu Qi finally understood why so many of the cultivators sent out by Great Yan Dynasty were killed in Meng Mountains. Countless aquatic demon beasts leaped up and surrounded Ing Zheng and his company in just a blink of an eye. Li Si blinked his eyes and bowed deeply, not daring to say a word. When Su Fu saw how Li Si behaved, a wave of resentment surged up from his heart. He said in a low voice, "Could this be the divine dragon in Prime Minister's heart? This is a great disrespect to His Majesty, a crime of deceiving him." Chapter 171. Behind Ing Zheng, Baiqi sprung up into the sky. Holding a white sword in his hand, he viciously hacked the back of the old turtle. The old turtle howled miserably. His back, which was stronger than diamond, was ripped apart by Baiqi's sword, severely injuring the inside of his body. But at the same time, Baiqi was smashed down by the frightening force brought by the huge weight of the old turtle, and fell into the rolling lake in a sorry state. Immediately, several dozens of long tentacles that looked like an octopus squeezed out from under the water, wrapped around Baiqi's body, and dragged him into the depths of the lake. Clutching the pearl in her hand, Catfish Flood Dragon stepped on a dark cloud and chased after Ing Zheng and his company angrily. At the same time, Ing Zheng and his company had returned to the peak of the lofty mountain, and the group of demon beasts had arrived at a place less than 3 miles away from the lofty mountain. Sighing for a while, Wu Qi watched the group of demon beasts rush toward the ambush that Ing Zheng had prepared beforehand, and he could not help but shake his head. Suddenly, Baiqi took a step forward, spat out a mouthful of mucus from the squid, and roared in exasperation, "Qin crossbow killing formation, kill!" Ing Zheng raised the seal in his hand up high, performed an incantation gesture and struck it into the seal, then cried out with a stern voice, "9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, sword sweeps 6 directions. Get the hell out of my way." Ing Zheng gave a loud cry that swept across all directions like a thunderclap. Several dozens of demon beasts who had formed their demon cores were knocked back while coughing blood, and were knocked several tens of miles away by the sound wave. Behind Ing Zheng, the figures of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent suddenly converged inwardly, and in a blink of an eye, they had transformed into a black seal the size of a fist, engraved with 9 coiling dragons. He grabbed the seal and cried out, "9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, 9 Provinces Conquering Grand Magic." Suddenly, several dozens of thunderbolts struck down from the sky, smashing towards Ing Zheng in a messy manner. But they were all crushed into pieces by Ing Zheng's palm. Meanwhile, Catfish Flood Dragon, who had curled up into a meatball, was shrinking rapidly. In just the time of 2 to 3 breaths, Catfish Flood Dragon had transformed into a strange black-clothed lady, 5 feet tall, with a bloated body, a catfish head, and a dragon horn in the middle of her skull. She casually made a grabbing motion towards the bottom of the lake. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound came from the bottom of the lake, and a black pearl the size of a human head slowly floated up, emitting a tremendous amount of water elemental energy. Countless water and yin thunders kept exploding crazily around Ing Zheng, making him tremble violently. Yet, none of them could break through the dark mist that shielded him. Ing Zheng stood amidst the dark mist with the imperial seal in his hand, his eyes bursting with a boundless murderous aura. His power alone was enough to fight against the demonic aura emanated from all the demon beasts in the entire lake of 4 waters. Two gigantic green prawn demons, each having a length of over 1,000 feet, glinting with a green gleam as if they were carved out of gems, let out a shrill cry. Each of them had 6 arms carrying 6 oddly shaped fangs, as they charged towards the several dozens of nascent soul realm captains behind Yingzheng. The front limbs of these green prawns had a very strong explosive force. With just 1 foot long front limb, they could shatter a crystal glass as thick as a thumb. As for these 2 green prawns who had become demon beasts, with just 1 thrust of their front limbs, they could pierce through a few lofty mountains. Coincidentally, Yingzheng raised the imperial seal again and swung it down forcefully. 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, sword stabilizing 8 directions. Catfish Flood Dragon, who had shrunk herself into a meatball, roared at the top of her voice, "Kill! Kill all these people in front of us. Whoever dares to retreat, I'll definitely eat him or her later." As Catfish Flood Dragon's furious roar echoed out, countless demon beasts charged towards Yingzheng and his company, braving the sword beams that blotted the sky. Among them, those demon beasts whose overall strength was equivalent to Earth immortals of nascent soul realm were the first to strike, unleashing their innate divine abilities. A series of creaking noises rang out as several hundred Jin Dan soldiers standing halfway up the mountain pulled out huge crossbows, each with an arm longer than an adult man. They knocked the bowstrings, then placed rows of specially made bolts, each measuring 8 feet and 1 inch long. Nonchalantly, the group of practitioners led by Su Fu pointed their fingers at the air. Countless runes shot out from their fingertips, slowly merging into the bolts. An old turtle demon, whose back armor measured over 2,000 feet in circumference, let out a loud howl as his huge body suddenly shot up into the sky. After that, he spun rapidly like a frisbee, smashing down towards Yingzheng's head with his back armor. When the old turtle demon's body fell down, watery clouds rolled and rolled around him, while countless thunderbolts burst out from his back armor, smashing down towards Yingzheng with deafening booms. Abruptly, the pitch-black imperial seal expanded and transformed into countless sword beams, each 1,000 feet long, that swept and slashed in all directions. The power of these sword beams was nearly equal to a full-force strike unleashed by a late-stage Jin Dan human immortal with a lower-grade magical treasure. The power of these sword beams was peerless, and in just a blink of an eye, they had covered the entire lake of 4 water. Wherever the countless sword beams went, all the demon beasts who had formed their demon cores were struck and killed. The blood of all kinds of demon beasts had even dyed the surface of the lake into a different color. Such an innate divine ability was something that even Wu Qi, who had cultivated the Dharma body of an earth immortal, could not compare with. Man was the most intelligent of all living beings, but all the birds, beasts, and insects under the heaven also had their own extraordinary abilities. When they cultivated to a certain level, they could evolve this innate ability into a divine ability, which would be no weaker than the Taoist magic of human cultivators. On the contrary, it would be even stronger. A large amount of sticky, pale green blood sprayed out from the shrimp demon's body, spraying onto the body of the battle general. Loud ripping noises kept echoing out. The corrosive force of the shrimp demon's blood was 100 times stronger than Aqua Regia. The nascent soul battle general let out a miserable howl as his armor melted abruptly. After that, his skin and muscles were melted into a puddle of poisonous liquid by the shrimp demon's blood. Nevertheless, the battle general was a decisive man. Without hesitation, he self-detonated his body. A beam of blood shot out from his dantian, amidst which his nascent soul, which stood 2 feet and 3 inches tall, fled in panic. In just one volley, nearly 10,000 demon beasts had their bodies pierced through, dying tragically on the spot. Seeing that so many demon beasts in the lake were wounded by Yingzheng with just a single strike, the catfish flood dragon let out a wild roar in exasperation. She grabbed fiercely towards the surface of the lake with 4 claws, causing 4 water dragons to shoot up into the sky. Like 4 long whips, the pitch-black water dragons were waved wildly and thrust towards Yingzheng's face. When the water dragons took shape, the water level of the lake of 4 water, which measured 3,000 miles in circumference, dropped by nearly 1,000 feet. It was not hard to tell how much water was stored in these 4 water dragons. There were 13 bolts in a single crossbow, and with a loud noise, a large number of bolts were shot whistling out. The bolts tore through the air and brought up a long trail of dark smoke, which twisted and turned into the shape of the heads of wild beasts on the surface of the bolts. The runes which Su Fu and the other practitioners had cast on the bolts had attracted the ferocious souls of all the wild beasts and birds that could be found everywhere in the woods, and attached them to the bolts, making the power of the bolts several dozens of times stronger. Suddenly, the pearl of fire and element in Wu Qi's dantian moved, resonating with the black pearl from a distance. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Judging from the reaction, the black pearl was also an acquired natural spirit item, and it contained an enormous amount of water element essence, which was a perfect match with the pearl in his dantian. Holding the seal in his hand, Yingzheng pressed it down forcefully. An invisible force came crashing out, and all the aquatic demon beasts that came within 30 miles around him fell from the sky while howling miserably. Some of the weaker demon beasts, such as loaches and eels, had their bodies torn apart by the tremendous force. Wounds of various sizes opened up on their bodies, and a huge amount of blood sprayed out from them. Some unlucky demon beasts had their bodies ripped into 2 by the tremendous force, sending their internal organs and bones flying all over the place. But before they could flee for another 30 miles, a pitch-black turtle demon suddenly revealed himself from the dark clouds that blotted the sky. Holding a pair of large hammers in his hands, the turtle demon stretched his neck and stared at the fleeing nascent soul with a pair of beady eyes, then smashed the hammers down towards the fleeing nascent soul. A miserable howl rang out, as the fleeing nascent soul was smashed into pieces by the hammers. Then, a water element in thunder burst out from the hammers and blew a thread of his broken soul into pieces. The nascent soul battle general's soul was completely destroyed, completely vanishing from this world. It was especially so for the giant squid. Apparently, it had suffered a great loss when it tangled with Bai Qi, and that was why it kept spitting out clouds of smoke and foam while roaring and leaping forward, using its several dozens of tentacles to thrash Yingzheng's body. Wu Qi was puzzled by what he saw. This was an inland lake, so how could there be a creature like a squid demon here? But on second thought, since even flood dragons existed in this lake, it should not be strange for there to be a giant squid here, right? 13 nascent soul battle generals stepped on clouds and greeted the 2 giant squid demons. They too drew their swords and charged forward, using their pure strength to fight head-on with the 2 giant squid demons. A series of several dozens of loud clanking noises were heard, as the 12 nascent soul battle generals were knocked flying backward while coughing blood. The heart protection mirrors on their chests had been shattered by the sharp teeth of the giant squid demons. Only the last battle general let out a furious roar, flipped his sword and brutally hacked on the chest armor of one of the giant squid demons, leaving a very long cut on its chest armor. "These demon beasts are ferocious. Retreat!" cried Yingzheng. A dark mist rushed out from under his feet and surrounded him, shielding Baichi and the others as they quickly fled towards the lofty mountain where Li Si and Su Fu had deployed the formation. How could these demon beasts know what was good or bad, and how could they know any trick to lure the enemy? While laughing wildly and joyfully, they chased after Yingzheng and his company with their heads held high. The catfish flood dragon had a huge body, and at least several tens of thousands of sword beams kept hitting her body. Under the full power of Yingzheng, the sword beams contained a boundless murderous aura, and the penetrating strength of each sword beam was incredibly strong. The catfish flood dragon's huge body kept trembling, as large pieces of scales were sliced off by the sword beams. Drops of blood kept bursting out from her body, and some of the sword beams even sliced off large chunks of flesh from her body, causing pale golden blood to spray out like a rainstorm. The pain made her body shiver violently, and her body shrunk into a meatball. The bolts streaked across the sky, whistling across the distance of 100 miles. Suddenly, the bodies of all the demon beasts who were charging forward turned stiff, and in the next moment, countless demon beasts plunged down like raindrops. 8 enormous black sword beams darted out from the seal, sweeping across all directions with a jarring whistle, cutting the tentacles of the giant squid into countless pieces on the spot, while the bodies of several hundred huge demon beasts were sliced apart by the sword beams. The pain made them howl and retreat, but there were also several dozens of demon beasts who had lost all their life force and plunged into the lake. A furious roar towered up into the sky from under the water, as Baichi, whose body was stained with all sorts of strange mucus and blood, fled from the lake in a sorry state. A giant squid, about 3 miles long and covered with countless shells and algae, slowly emerged from the water. It stared fiercely at Baichi with its eyes gleaming with a ferocious gleam as it roared with a muffled voice, "I've eaten, I've eaten, I've eaten." With a shake of its body, 7 to 8 tentacles suddenly grew to several tens of miles long, grabbing towards Baichi with a jarring noise. A loud boom rang out as 4 water dragons were ripped to shreds. Countless streams of water shot up into the sky, turning into a heavy downpour that blanketed an area of 10,000 miles in circumference. Ingzheng hovered steadily in midair, taking the brute force of the attack head-on. Blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and his robe was ripped to shreds by the water dragons. Half of his body was bruised and swollen, and soon turned dark purple. While coughing blood, Ingzheng stared at the catfish flood dragon and laughed wildly. "You're able to hurt my body of a true dragon. You do have some abilities, catfish demon. I've taken a fancy to you, and you're the best candidate for me to cultivate the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic." Chapter 172. A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. Under his gaze, all the secrets of those strange bolts were revealed. The bolts were forged using the ice and snow essence of the northernmost ice and the 9 nether dark iron, which was produced in the filthy and evil land in the Earth's core. They were extremely and evil, and contained a thread of evil poison that could destroy the corporeal body and soul of cultivators. During the forging process, at least 19 deadly poisons had been added into the bolts, each of which was powerful enough to kill a Jin Dan human immortal in an instant. They were one of the most vicious objects under the heaven. On top of that, the runes that Su Fu and the other practitioners had cast on the bolts were called the Soul Melting Spell, which borrowed the power of evil souls to melt the corporeal body of cultivators. It was a very powerful spell. When the bolts were shot at the same time, apart from those demon beasts whose cultivation base was comparable to Earth immortals who barely survived, all the other demon beasts within 100 miles were killed by the bolts. Blood rained down from the sky. Apart from several dozens of the strongest demon beasts hovering in midair, all the other demon beasts plunged into the lake, splashing the water up into the sky. Catfish Flood Dragon, who had rushed up excitedly with the black pearl in her hand, was stunned as well. Standing on a cloud, she stared blankly at the practitioners and soldiers of Daqin, who had formed a formation in front of her. She felt a chill run down her spine, and dared not to go any further. With just one strike, over 10,000 demon beasts were killed. How many demon beasts were there in the Lake of 4 Waters? The formation in front of her had given her a great threat, a threat that was strong enough to kill her. After hesitating for a brief moment, Catfish Flood Dragon gave a loud cry, then stepped on a demon wind and fled toward the center of the lake. Those powerful demon beasts were not stupid. Since even the strongest overlord of the Lake of 4 Waters had fled for her life, they naturally followed closely behind Catfish Flood Dragon, stepping on the demon wind and spitting clouds and mist all the way. A cold, mocking smile emerged on Ingzheng's face as he cried out in a deep voice, "Since you've come, don't leave. Catfish Flood Dragon, you're mine, and no one can save you." In the middle of the formation, Su Fu glanced at Li Si and said coolly, "Prime Minister, please make your move." Li Si nodded his head. He took out the strange scroll and writing brush, staring at the crowd of demon beasts that were running away at top speed. Then he casually wrote the word / on the scroll. Li Si softly shouted, "Words are the law. / kill in all directions." With a gentle flick of the brush, the word sever quietly flew out. Suddenly, it turned into a faint light that was almost invisible to the naked eye and shot forward. A series of shrill howls could be heard, and the bodies of the slowest monster beasts suddenly split open from the middle, and their internal organs and blood fell into the lake. The dozens of demon beasts in front of them roared in pain. Countless wounds had appeared on their bodies, and some of the wounds even penetrated their internal organs. Through the huge wounds, one could see their squirming internal organs. Some of the demon beasts were too heavily injured and could no longer ride the clouds, so they also fell into the lake. Li Si smiled. Once again, he casually wrote the word, "turn," on the scroll. He snorted lightly and said, "Words are the law. Turn, move the stars." Then, he flicked the tip of the writing brush, unleashing a beam of light that fell onto the catfish flood dragon, who was running for her life. A strange fluctuation of natural energies arose, and in the next moment, her body disappeared from the spot. When she reappeared, she was already several miles behind Ying Zheng and his company. Her body was shrouded in a dark cloud, as she was seen gritting her teeth and rushing towards Ying Zheng and his company at top speed. Su Fu smiled coolly and said, "Prime Minister, your divine ability is indeed marvelous." Suddenly, the catfish flood dragon, who was running for her life with her head lowered, noticed that the scenery underneath her was different. A moment ago, it was a vast lake under her head, but now, it had turned into a mountain range. She hastily raised her head and looked ahead, and saw Ying Zheng, whose upper body was bared, looking at her with a smile on his face. The catfish flood dragon cried out in shock. She opened her mouth and unleashed several dozens of water element thunderbolts, smashing towards Ying Zheng and Baiqi. After that, she turned her head and flew away in a slanted direction. The tip of Li Si's writing brush moved again, and the catfish flood dragon's body disappeared abruptly. She reappeared right in front of Ying Zheng, still riding the cloud and flying towards him. No matter how she changed the direction of her flight, as long as Li Si moved his brush, she would always appear at the same spot and continue flying towards Ying Zheng. Ying Zheng grabbed and shattered the water element thunderbolt, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Evil creature, just follow me. I'll seize your blood essence and soul, and refine them into the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. In the future, when I unify the world, I'll build an ancestral hall for you to enjoy the worship of incense. What do you think? I've already shown you a great kindness by allowing your soul to reincarnate. Could it be that you really want to be beaten to the point where your soul disperses and you don't even have the last bit of hope for reincarnation?" Flustered and exasperated, the catfish flood dragon roared, "Ancestral hall? I've already become a ghost in the underworld, so why would I need an ancestral hall? How rude of you! How dare you intrude into this forest and slaughter my people? Do you know that I'm a subordinate of Wanying Dragon King, and I was ordered by him to guard over the Lake of Four Water? I'm the mountain protector of the eastern gate of Meng Mountains. If you kill me, Wanying Dragon King will never forgive you." It would have been better if she did not say that, but after she said that, Ying Zheng's face turned extremely unsightly. He reached out his hand and touched the wound on his chest, which had more than half healed, but still looked ferocious. He sneered and said, "Wanying Dragon King? It seems the demon dragon who wounded me that day calls himself Wanying Dragon King. So, you, evil creature, are the subordinate of that demon dragon? Good, good, good." After shouting "good" 3 times, Ying Zheng cried out sternly, "Activate the formation, trap and kill it." Immediately, Su Fu let out a long and sonorous cry. Both of his palms moved like lightning bolts, unleashing beams of strange light. The few hundred practitioners around him struck at the same time, coordinating with the runes unleashed by Su Fu and unleashing all kinds of primordial runes. The runes unleashed by Su Fu were the trunk, and the runes unleashed by these practitioners were the branches and leaves. They circled around the trunk and transformed into a sheet of hazy light, which instantly blanketed the sky for several tens of miles in circumference, including the catfish flood dragon and all the people. Those fleeing demon beasts were scared out of their wits by the ferocious methods of Ying Zheng and his men. They could no longer care about their immediate superiors, and had plunged back into the Lake of Four Water to hide themselves, not daring to come out again. The catfish flood dragon was trapped in this small patch of sky, facing Ying Zheng and over 1,000 mighty cultivators of the Qin dynasty all by herself. Bai Qi led the soldiers and flew up into the sky, surrounding catfish flood dragon, who was so frightened that she did not know what to do. He kept unleashing one sword beam after another, smashing her and sending her flying all over the sky. The sword beams unleashed by Bai Qi did not hurt Catfish Flood Dragon's body, but they always made her tremble and suffer severe pain. After dozens of rounds of attacks, Catfish Flood Dragon's vitality was severely damaged, and the dark mist around her had dimmed by half. Unable to bear the pain, she gave a shrill cry and sprung up into the sky, crashing into the light formed by the primordial runes. A loud boom rang out, as several dozens of green thunderbolts came bursting out of nowhere and exploded her, causing water vapor to surge and blood to spray out from her 7 apertures. Her body was charred like a fish in a frying pan, and she scrambled back in a sorry state. How could it be so easy to break through the primordial runes formed by Su Fu and his men? All of a sudden, Li Si waved his hand and cast out a tiny character, mountain. Just like what Wu Qi did that day, a small mountain came whistling down from above and hit right on the Catfish Flood Dragon. A miserable howl rang out, as she was knocked down from the sky by the small mountain. She fell to her knees on the ground, holding the small mountain above her head with both hands while staring at Li Si and his men with a ferocious gleam in her eyes. Yingjing laughed. He looked at the Catfish Flood Dragon, who was suppressed by Li Si's Dharma word, and said in an indifferent voice, "Evil creature, do you want to obey me? I'll give you a chance. Release your true spirit and be reincarnated, leaving your fleshly body and soul behind. If you dare to do anything unusual again, I'll definitely kill your true spirit and not give you the chance to be reincarnated." Catfish Flood Dragon twisted her wrist, wanting to throw out the black pearl to attack the enemy. But when she saw the ferocious faces of Bai Qitian, and the other Daqin generals, she felt a chill run down her spine, and dared not to throw out her last trump card so easily. She gnashed her teeth and stared at Yingjing for a while, then screamed, "His Majesty Wanying Dragon King will definitely avenge me. All of you will die in this mountain. Today, you have slaughtered over 10,000 aquatic demons in the Lake of Four Waters, which means you are going against the hundreds of millions of aquatic demons in Longyuan River. All of you will die in this forest." Hundreds of millions of aquatic demons? A murderous look flashed across Yingjing's face as he said in a deep voice, "Once I've mastered my divine ability, I'll deploy all 10 million tiger soldiers of Daqin to wipe out all the aquatic demons in Longyuan River. I'll kill every single one of them, not leaving a single fish or shrimp alive." Yingjing sneered and said proudly that Wanying Dragon King is destined to be the first dragon soul of the 2nd stage of my 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. He strode to a place about 1,000 feet away from the Catfish Flood Dragon, performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and was about to grab her. Catfish Flood Dragon's eyes went wide. She had the black pearl in her right palm, which was holding the artificial mountain above her head, and was about to throw it towards Yingjing. At the same time, Wu Qi had stealthily sneaked 3 feet under the ground. With such a short distance between them, Wu Qi carefully transmitted his voice to the Catfish Flood Dragon, not letting Yingjing and the others hear his voice. Then he said in a low voice, "Listen up, big catfish. If you give me the black pearl and all your treasures, I'll save you from this disaster." The Catfish Flood Dragon's eyes narrowed, and she nodded her head heavily. She was smart enough to keep her mouth shut. However, the little mountain above her head was getting heavier and heavier, making her body tremble. She could only hold the little mountain with one last breath, and she did not have the strength to speak. "Swear on your prime soul that you'll give me all your treasures, and you won't use any means to punish me for taking advantage of your precarious situation. Only then will I save you." Wu Qi smiled. Looting a burning house was also a kind of great thief. As long as it was used well, it could make people willingly give up their treasures. The Catfish Flood Dragon took a deep breath, mustered up the last bit of her strength and roared out, "I swear on my prime soul to the heavenly fiend that whoever can save me, all my treasures will belong to him. On top of that, I'll definitely not punish him after the incident, and I'll treat him as a distinguished guest." Yingjing's expression fell instantly upon hearing the Catfish Flood Dragon's loud shout. He shouted harshly, "Who's here? Who dares to ruin my plan?" While laughing wildly, Wu Qi had already sprung up into the sky from underground. Facing all the surrounding Earth immortals and Jin Dan human immortals, he fearlessly took out over 6,000 talismans drawn by Elder Jin Dan of Heavenly Spirit sect from his storage ring. He even threw out the 5 huge talisman treasures, exhaling 5 mouthfuls of innate energy onto them. Wu Qi did not want to form a talisman formation in his Jin Dan, as it would make him unable to use any flying swords or magical treasures in the future. Although these 5 talisman treasures were very powerful, they were of little value to Wu Qi. Therefore, without any hesitation, Wu Qi took out all 5 talisman treasures and brazenly launched their last and strongest attack, self-detonation. Over 6,000 talismans exploded in an instant, which was equivalent to 6,000 human immortals of Jin Dan attacking at the same time with all their might within a distance of about 1 mile. The power of the self-detonation of 5 talisman treasures was equivalent to a desperate attack launched by 5 Mahayana Jin Dan cultivators by burning their divine souls. Such an attack had instantly sucked away all the natural energies within a radius of 100 miles. No matter it was Su Fu's talisman formation or the divine ability of Dharma word, as they had lost the supply of natural energies, they shattered with a loud boom. Wu Qi let out a wild laugh, grabbed the catfish flood dragon, and transformed into a beam of yellow light, plunging into the ground. Chapter 173. What was the scene when over 6,000 talismans, which were equivalent to the full force strike of a Jin Dan human immortal, exploded at the same time? Wu Qi had no idea, and he could not care less about it. In any case, he brought the catfish flood dragon and plunged into the ground, transforming into a stream of earthen mist and flying towards the lake of 4 waters at top speed. However, for Ing Zheng and his men who stayed above ground, it was a catastrophe that nearly wiped them out. 6,000 talismans exploded at the same time, sucking away all the natural energies within 100 miles circumference in an instant. It was a chain reaction that caused a disturbance in natural energies, just like the chain reaction of a nuclear warhead. 6,000 talismans were compressed into a golden ball of light, measuring about 10 feet in circumference. 5 talisman treasures spun rapidly around the golden ball for a while, then exploded with a loud boom. Thunder, lightning, flame, poisonous flame, and all sorts of attacks of 5 elements were gone. It was a complete energy explosion. The energies of 5 elements were transformed into the most violent, frightening force that was close to the chaos, and exploded right in front of Ing Zheng and his men. A towering beam of red light rose into the sky, while tens of mushroom clouds rose from the nearby mountains. Along with the dazzling light and the strong wind, the mountains within a radius of 10 miles were instantly turned into nothingness, and the ground caved in, leaving a huge crater. When the talismans and talisman treasures exploded, the faces of Ing Zheng and his men twisted. Baiqi leaped up and stood before Ing Zheng, his armor emitting a blinding light and shielding both of them. The explosion knocked both of them far away, making them sink deep into a lofty mountain. After that, the lofty mountain crumbled to pieces, and both of them were knocked flying away once again. Apart from those earth immortals who were protected by magical treasures, nearly 100 Qin soldiers with the cultivation base of Jin Dan were instantly vaporized. Not even their souls could escape from the explosion. Bai Qitian, who was also near the center of the explosion, abruptly spurted out a shadow of a black flood dragon, which wrapped around his body and carried him away. In just 3 seconds, the violent ripples of natural energies in the surroundings had shattered the black flood dragon, but Bai Qitian had already escaped. The shadow of this black flood dragon was a life-saving dragon energy that Ing Zheng had personally injected into Baiqi's body after Baiqi had rendered some meritorious service, and it had indeed saved his life today. Su Fu and Li Si, who were standing on the top of a mountain far away, looked at the chaotic scene as if they had lost their parents. They could not even get close to the explosion point, and they shrieked, "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The warlocks and soldiers were also in a panic. They looked blankly at the area, which looked like the end of the world. Their bodies trembled, and cold sweat kept coming out of their bodies. Ing Zheng was the sky of the Deqin dynasty and the ground of the Deqin dynasty. If anything happened to him, the Duqin dynasty would definitely fall apart. While Su Fu and Li Si were screaming in panic, Ying Zheng's voice was heard coming from afar. "Shut up. I'm not dead yet, and I don't need you to cry here. Liexin, did I ask you to lie by the side to watch the show? Where's your marksmanship? Where's your bow? Where are your arrows?" Following Ying Zheng's loud roar, a general clad in a silver armor and carrying a longbow suddenly leaped out from the top of a mountain several tens of miles away that looked like a pen stand. Behind the general's armor was a pair of wings made of metal blades. The wings were fluttering in the wind, looking as light as a pair of wings. A cold laugh rang out, and a vertical eye suddenly opened up on the general's forehead. In an instant, a hazy golden light shone and illuminated the area 100 miles in circumference. Under the illumination of this vertical eye, Wu Qi, who was fleeing with Catfish Flood Dragon 1,000 feet underground, could be seen clearly. At the moment, Wu Qi was about to enter the Lake of Four Waters with Catfish Flood Dragon. Once they entered the lake, they would be Catfish Flood Dragon's territory, and the difficulty for Ying Zheng and his men to capture her would be at least 100 times higher than before. Li Exin, the general of Duqin, who was standing on the peak of the mountain, grabbed out 3 black arrows with the arrowheads shaped like wolf heads, and their shafts densely covered with countless fine patterns. He quickly pulled the bowstring, knocked the arrows, and aimed straight at Wu Qi, who was fleeing at top speed underground. 3 shrill wolf howls rang out abruptly, as 3 black beams of light, each 1,000 feet long, shot out at top speed, transforming into 3 greedy wolf heads with their mouths wide open, thrusting straight towards Wu Qi. The huge flame produced by the explosion of talismans and talisman treasures was pierced through by the black beams, and in just a blink of an eye, they caught up with Wu Qi and drilled straight into the ground. The vertical eye on Li Exion's forehead lit up, and in the next moment, Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine, as a threat of death rose out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he brought Catfish Flood Dragon and plunged into the ground. Just when they were 3,000 feet underground, the arrows shot out by Li Exin had already pierced through the ground and arrived behind Wu Qi in a blink of an eye. The arrows came with a frigid air, as well as a tremendous aura, which made Wu Qi's body tense up and made all the pores on his skin stand on end. Li Exion's archery had reached the acme of perfection. Instinctively, Wu Qi felt that no matter what methods he used to evade, there was no way he could avoid these 3 arrows. Also, no matter what method Li Exion used to discover Wu Qi's whereabouts, at least he could see Wu Qi's figure, and Wu Qi was not willing to use the Silver Lotus to save his own life, as it was an extraordinary treasure that could easily attract the attention of others. He had already offended Duqin, and if he were to show off a few more innate grade spirit items, he would be courting death. At that point of time, not only the people of Duqin, but also those from Great Yan Dynasty would have their eyes on him when the news spread out. That would truly make him an enemy of the entire world, and he would not be able to live a peaceful life anymore. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi shouted at Catfish Flood Dragon, "Show your true form, if you want to live." Catfish Flood Dragon was very obedient at this moment. Although she did not know why she had to show her true form, she twisted her body and transformed back to her original form of a catfish, which measured over 3,000 feet long. Boom, boom, boom. 3 loud booms echoed out as Li Exion's arrows hit her body and exploded, leaving 3 large holes on her body, each about 10 feet in diameter. If Wu Qi were to receive this kind of injury, he would be dead by now. But when it was inflicted on Catfish Flood Dragon, it only made her howl in pain. She quickly transformed back to her human form, then turned to Wu Qi and cursed, "You bastard! How dare you ask me to be your shield? You? Is this how you save people?" Knowing that he was in the wrong, Wu Qi carried Catfish Flood Dragon and kept running away without saying a word. On the ground, Ying Zheng and the others, who saw Wu Qi's behavior with various mystic techniques, cursed together, "Shameless." Only Li Si nodded his head, then murmured under his breath, "This young man has a good temperament, and I like him very much. If not for him attacking His Majesty, perhaps he could inherit Li Si's mantle? He is treacherous, cruel, and merciless. Even Su Fu has suffered a great loss from him." This young man is interesting, very interesting. Standing on the peak of the mountain with his hands clasped behind his back, Li Si looked at Wu Qi, who was fleeing at top speed underground. Surprisingly, he felt a great sense of admiration. Seeing that all 3 arrows had missed their target, Li Xian's face turned extremely unsightly. Abruptly, he pulled out a heavy arrow with an arrowhead shaped like a black tortoise, the shaft as thick as an adult's arm, but only 3 feet long. He knocked it on the bowstring and was about to shoot it at Wu Qi. Right at this critical juncture, right in front of Wu Qi, right next to the edge of the Lake of 4 Waters, a general clad in a golden armor with a resolute face suddenly leaped out of the lake, leading hundreds of elite soldiers, and stopped at the point where the lake and the shore met. The general was holding a bronze mirror with a diameter of 1 foot and 2 inches in his left hand, emitting a hazy green light that shone several thousand feet deep into the ground, covering Wu Qi's body. In his left hand was a strange coiling dragon spear with a crimson gold shape, and he cried out sternly, "Why don't you surrender now? With De Qin and Wang Jian here, you will not be able to act so arrogantly." On the other 2 mountaintops, on the left and right of Wu Qi, 2 more generals dashed out. "De Qin and Wang Ben are here," cried one of the black-armored generals at the top of his voice. "De Qin and Wang Li are here." Another black-armored general cried out coldly, "I swear I will kill this thief." Wang Jian, Wang Ben, and Wang Li, the 3 generals from the Wang clan of Qin, one of the 7 warlords of the Warring States period, were all here. Their grandfather, father, and grandson were holding a bronze mirror that looked exactly the same, emitting 3 bright lights of green, white, and blue, which locked tightly onto Wu Qi's body. Abruptly, Wu Qi's traveling speed became a few times slower, as a force that was stronger and tenacious than the magnetic force had tightly bound him, making it hard for him to even move his fingers. Then, Ying Zheng's joyful laughter was heard coming from afar. "My dear ministers, don't slack off. Capture this little thief. I'd like to see how bold he is to go against me, De Qin. And that catfish flood dragon, don't take her life." All the generals and generals of Qin army gave their assent, while Baiqi and Li Xian rushed up with their weapons in their hands, surrounding Wu Qi from all directions. Su Fu and Li Si had also arrived with many practitioners, casting all sorts of restrictive spells like raindrops, turning the ground around Wu Qi as hard as diamond. Meanwhile, Li Si had written 108 mountain characters in a row, unleashing an enormous earth element energy that pressed down on Wu Qi, making him unable to move even a finger. Ying Zheng laughed even more joyfully, then said loudly, "I knew you, little thief, would definitely follow behind me and ruin my plan. Well, this is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. That catfish flood dragon can help me cultivate my divine ability, and as for you, little thief, I just happen to need your testimony." Ha! Ying Zheng let out a loud and joyful laughter. Served by a few practitioners, he changed into a set of clean and tidy emperor robe, then rode on a cloud and rushed over to where Wu Qi was. 3,000 feet underground, Wu Qi looked at the catfish flood dragon, whose body was cramping with pain, and said with a wry smile, "I still have a way to escape, but it will cost me a lot of my blood essence. If you promise to give me 30% of your prime dragon blood essence to temper my corporeal body, I'll save you." The catfish flood dragon clenched her jaws tightly and cried out, "If you can save me, 30% of my blood essence will be yours. If that's not enough, I can also teach you the body tempering technique of Flood Dragon Clan which Weining Dragon King taught me." Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. This catfish flood dragon was too kind and honest. Not only did she give him 30% of her primordial dragon blood essence, she even gave him the body tempering technique. What Wu Qi lacked now was a powerful divine ability to temper his corporeal body, and to fight with his corporeal body. The body tempering technique of Flood Dragon Clan should be pretty good, right? But if a living human cultivator were to cultivate it, would he be able to produce some strange things? But he did not care too much. Seeing that Ying Zheng was about to arrive on a cloud, Wu Qi hastily began to burn his blood essence. The blood-burning escape art of Scroll of Stealing was activated, and in an instant, 90% of Wu Qi's blood turned into nothingness. His body was emptied, and his vision darkened, nearly passing out. The enormous energy transformed from his blood essence was rocking and rocking rapidly in his meridians. Clenching his jaws tightly, Wu Qi recited a few incantations, then quickly performed incantation gestures with both hands and thrust them out. A blood-red light flashed around him, as Wu Qi brought the catfish flood dragon and abruptly pierced through the strange light unleashed by the mirrors. Like a stream of light, they went through the restrictive spell jointly deployed by Su Fu and Li Si, and plunged into the Lake of Four Waters in a flash. Guided by the catfish flood dragon, both men flew at top speed for over 2,000 miles, and plunged into a hidden underwater mansion in the center of the lake. Chapter 174. The Lake of Four Waters was the place where four rivers converged. The surface of the lake was filled with turbulent waves, and it was extremely dangerous. However, the area below 1,000 feet from the surface of the lake was calm and peaceful. Apart from some rapid undercurrents that flowed along a fixed path, the rest of the lake was filled with beautiful sceneries, as if it was a paradise. The Catfish Flood Dragon's cave was located in an abyss slightly to the south of the center of the Lake of Four Waters. The depth of the water here was over 30 miles, and at the bottom of the lake was a large number of strange rocks that looked like jade and were shaped like corals. These strange rocks were scattered all over the area of 100 miles in circumference. Amidst these rocks, there was a tens of miles long and about 1 mile wide abyss that plunged 100 miles deep. The Catfish Flood Dragon's cave was located in a water cave at the bottom of the abyss. The main entrance of the cave was not very spacious, as it was artificially built into an arched door that looked like a city gate. A plaque made from 10,000 years old water wood was hung on top of it, on which 3 characters were written, Catfish King's Cave, in a handwriting that looked like the scratching of a chicken's claw. On the rock walls on both sides of the arched door were several thousand pearls of different sizes, emitting bright lights of different colors, such as green, white, red, and blue, illuminating the abyss as if it was daytime. Inside the cave was a huge cave, measuring about 10 miles in circumference. Right in the middle of the cave was a large stone bed. Presumably, it was the place where the demon catfish usually meditated and cultivated herself. There were countless small holes on the walls of the cave, and some aquatic demon beasts could be seen moving in and out of them. Right when Wu Qi brought the catfish flood dragon into the cave, he immediately fell to the ground. In an instant, 90% of his blood essence was burned into magical energy, and he exercised a mystic technique to flee 1,000 miles away. If it were an ordinary man who had lost 90% of his blood, he would have died long ago. Fortunately, Wu Qi had a mystic technique that kept him alive. But he had also exhausted all his energy essence, and his body was as empty as a broken sack, without any strength left. The catfish flood dragon also fell to the ground when she entered the cave. She sprung to her feet, waved her hands and cried out, "Boys, close the door and activate all the formations. There are villains who want to capture me. Quick, activate all the defensive mechanisms. Io, send a letter to the old Dragon King and ask him to come and save us." Amidst Catfish Flood Dragon's loud roar, a group of strange-looking little demons, such as crabs, shrimps, carps, loaches, and many others, came leaping out of the cave, hastily closing the 3 feet thick main door, which was forged with pure in-water silver, and placed 3 metal bolts on it, each as thick as a human head. Soon after, these little demons scrambled around in a flurry, waving some formation flags and the like. Suddenly, the underwater mansion trembled, and a protective formation had been faintly activated. Wu Qi took a deep breath, pulled out 2 bottles of pills that could quickly replenish his energy and breath, and shoved them into his mouth. After that, he grabbed the catfish flood dragon, who was waving her arms and legs wildly, and said, 30% of your blood essence, quick, then all your treasures, quick, quick. I can't afford to provoke that group of people outside. I'll leave after taking what I deserve. Just now, when those little demons activated the protective formation, Wu Qi gave a glance at the formation flags and magical items placed on the platform placed right in the middle of the cave. It was a 3 dragons water-sucking formation, which communicated with the water veins and gathered the earth energies. The formation communicated with the energies from the 3 tributaries of the Lake of Four Waters, transforming into an immeasurable water element guarding formation. Once the formation was fully activated, the enormous water element energies from the 3 tributaries could transform into 3 water dragons to attack the enemy. But, after all, it was a pure water element formation, and it lacked some variations of the interaction and restraint between the 5 elements. On top of that, the person who constructed the formation had a rough understanding of the Tao of formations, and the formation flags and other magical items used to control the formation were not worth looking at. At most, they could only unleash less than 30% of the total power of the 3 tributaries. With such little power, how could they withstand the siege of Ing Zheng and his men? Just now, Wu Qi was nearly killed by Ing Zheng's generals, and he had personally experienced the formidable cultivation base of Daqin and the other captains, as well as the strange treasures they possessed. Not to mention anything else, just the large bao owned by Li Xian and the 3 mirrors owned by Wang Jian and his family members were almost as powerful as upper-grade magical treasures. Even Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, which claimed to be the strongest among all 13 immortal Dao sects of Great Yan Dynasty, only possessed 5 flying swords of lower-grade magical treasures. Of course, Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect also had a dustless lamp, which could be classified as an innate spirit treasure. However, as it was stolen by Wu Qi, it was not included in the list. All in all, no matter it was the cultivation base or magical treasures of the people from Daqin Dynasty, they were all incredibly powerful. So, how could this crude underwater mansion stop them, who were as ferocious as wolves and tigers? Once the 3 dragons' water-sucking formation was breached, Wu Qi had no interest in dying together with this catfish flood dragon. Although the catfish flood dragon was a demon beast and had an innate ferociousness in her bones, she did have a simple and honest character. Upon hearing Wu Qi's request, she quickly ran to the side of her stone bed, pulled out several dozens of magical items, each glinting with various colors, from a secret compartment at the head of the bed. Without any hesitation, she told Wu Qi, "Apart from my flood dragon core, all the other treasures are here. I'll give you 30% of my blood essence now." Then, she casually drew a line on her fingertip. Her body trembled, and a stream of golden blood shot out from it. Wu Qi reached out his hand and grabbed the golden blood, refining it and fusing it into his body. An enormous energy essence burst out from his body like an explosion, quickly fusing with all the cells in Wu Qi's body. Creaking noises were heard coming from Wu Qi's body, as the strength of his fleshly body skyrocketed once again. His spirit, energy, and vitality were soaring at an incredible speed, and in just a blink of an eye, they were at least a few times stronger. As the catfish flood dragon had a huge body, 30% of her blood essence was nearly equal to the total blood essence of several hundred ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, as her cultivation base was equivalent to that of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, the energy essence in her blood essence was even greater and purer. After barely absorbing a little bit of the blood essence, Wu Qi's fleshly body could no longer endure it. Hastily, he kept the remaining enormous amount of blood essence into his body, placing it in the stamen of the silver lotus and nourishing it with the innate energies of 5 elements. After that, he took a deep breath and rose to his feet, his body brimming with energy. The blood essence he consumed just now had been completely replenished, and he even obtained a great amount of it. Currently, Wu Qi was brimming with energy, as if he had the strength to lift up a mountain. After putting all the treasures brought to him by the catfish flood dragon into his storage ring, Wu Qi did not have the time to identify the origin of these dazzling objects. He cupped his fist and said, "All right, the deal is done. Wu Qi will take his leave now. Fellow Taoist, you better be careful. I'm afraid those people won't let you go until they capture you alive." The catfish flood dragon kept nodding her big catfish head and said in a low, muffled voice, "If they want to take my life, they will have to see if they have the ability to do so." Those useless fools must have already sent the news to Old Dragon King when they returned. Also, I've asked my children to send out a message asking for help just now. I'm sure Old Dragon King will be here soon. Old Dragon King. Waning Dragon King. During the fight between Ing Zheng and the Catfish Flood Dragon, Wu Qi had heard this name before. He was the one who wounded Ing Zheng and killed several tens of thousands of elite soldiers of Ing Zheng. He was a demon dragon who was very close to becoming a heaven immortal. Once he became a heaven immortal, he would have the body of a true dragon, and his overall strength would be at least 100 times stronger than now. Wu Qi wondered what kind of good things this giant of the demon clan had. However, Wu Qi knew very well that although he could deal with Ing Zheng and his men, compared to this giant demon dragon who had lived for countless years, he was still too young and naive. Unless he could cultivate his nascent soul, no matter how good his divine abilities and cultivation techniques were, they would be useless in the face of an absolute overall strength. If he wanted to fish out some benefits from this old dragon, he would have to wait until his cultivation base became stronger. As Wu Qi was about to bid farewell to the Catfish Flood Dragon and leave, a tricolored beam of green, white, and blue suddenly came falling down from the sky. The cave abode was instantly locked down by the tricolored beam. Dozens of shrill wolf howls could be heard coming from the cave abode, while one sharp arrow force after another fell down at a high speed, causing the cave abode to shake violently. The thick and heavy water outside the cave abode was stirred up by huge waves, while dozens of formation flags and magical items on the platform in the cave abode were knocked down. "Oh no!" cried the Catfish Flood Dragon, hastily leaped onto the platform, waving her arms and legs while holding a few formation flags to control the formation to defend against the enemy. However, it seemed this Catfish Flood Dragon was not very proficient in the Tao of formations, as she placed a few formation flags in the wrong positions, and used the wrong hand gestures to control the formation. Initially, the formation could defend against the enemy automatically, but after being disturbed by her, its power became weaker and weaker. In just a blink of an eye, more than half of the water element energy gathered by the formation was destroyed. The sound of water splashing was heard coming from outside the cave abode, followed by Ing Zheng's voice, "Evil creature, and that little thief, I won't let you go this time." A stream of water lit up on the platform, showing the scene outside the cave abode. Leading a large group of men, Ing Zheng had lined up into a formation above the cave abode. Li Si was seen writing quickly with a writing brush in the eye of the formation, writing one character after another, mountain. As the last stroke was drawn, Li Si casually flicked his finger, and the numerous characters on the scroll shot out whistling, wheeling and wheeling above his head. Suddenly, the ground at the bottom of the lake began to tremble, as a huge amount of earth element energy rolled and rushed towards those characters. A lofty mountain, standing a few miles tall and having a base of nearly 1 mile in circumference, suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Panting heavily, Li Si pointed his finger at the lofty mountain, then forcefully pointed his finger at the Catfish King's mansion. The lofty mountain fell down from the sky with a whistling noise, smashing viciously onto the nearly 1 mile thick dark water layer above the Catfish King's mansion. 99% of the water element energy gathered by the three dragons' water-sucking formation was shattered by the lofty mountain. Countless waves of water rolled and rolled in all directions, leaving only a thin layer of water vapor that barely protected the cave abode. The tremendous pressure from the lofty mountain caused the cliffs surrounding the cave abode to crumble, while the violent impact shattered the broken rocks into countless tiny particles of sand and sand. With just one strike, the terrain within 100 miles around the Catfish King's mansion had changed its shape. "I'm finished. I'm going to die." The Catfish Flood Dragon cried out in exasperation. The formation flags in her hand, as well as the magical items on the platform, all exploded into pieces. The Catfish Flood Dragon was caught unprepared and was blown away from the platform by one of the exploding formation flags. She rolled and rolled before Wu Qi, her body covered in dark smoke. While Wu Qi was hesitating whether he should help the Catfish Flood Dragon or simply run away as soon as possible, a golden flood dragon, with the diameter of a water bucket and several tens of feet long, dashed out from the hole in the deepest part of the cave. Following behind the golden flood dragon were dozens of strange and bizarre demon beasts of the flood dragon family. Some of them looked like big fishes, some looked like giant pythons, and some looked like pangolins. However, all of them had dragon horns on their heads, for claws on their abdomens, and golden or silver dragon whiskers growing from the corners of their mouths. When she saw the golden flood dragon, who was enshrouded in a faint layer of watery clouds, the catfish flood dragon cried out joyfully, "Whinnying Dragon King, help me." Pointing her finger at Wu Qi, she cried out, "This little brother is a good man, and he has saved my life. Those people outside are all villains, and they want to capture me to cultivate some 9 dragons cauldron grand magic." The golden flood dragon twisted its body and transformed into an old man with white hair and a ferocious face. Clad in a golden robe, Whinnying Dragon King gave Wu Qi a ferocious look, then laughed evilly and said, "9 dragons cauldron grand magic? This name sounds so familiar." Clicking his tongue, Whinnying Dragon King said with a gloomy voice, "My boys, hide yourselves. When they come in, we'll catch them off guard." The dozens of strange and bizarre flood dragons transformed back into their human forms, standing guard around the cauldron. From the hole they came out from just now, many strange and bizarre aquatic demons kept leaping out. In just a blink of an eye, the entire cauldron was filled with countless aquatic demons. Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. Chapter 175. Tens of thousands of demons had gathered together, and all of them had formed their demon cores, having a cultivation base equal to peak Jin Dan realm or above. All the demon beasts had transformed into their human forms, preparing their most brutal and vicious innate abilities, preparing to deliver a deadly strike to the invading cultivators. Some demon beasts even found some magical treasures by chance, or crafted some magical treasures using their horns, teeth, scales, and some other things that fell off from their human forms. All of them were ready. Some of the demon beasts threw hostile glances at Wu Qi. After all, it was too eye-catching for a living human being to appear amidst several tens of thousands of demon beasts. However, after he heard that Wu Qi had saved Catfish Flood Dragon's life, Whinnying Dragon King immediately stood beside Wu Qi. As the king of all aquatic demon beasts in Longyuan River, none of the demon beasts present dared to challenge his dignity. Although some demon beasts wished to open their mouths and swallow Wu Qi, when they saw Whinnying Dragon King talking and laughing with Wu Qi, they obediently gave up on the idea. Currently, Wu Qi was talking to Whinnying Dragon King with utmost caution. This old demon dragon had lived in Longyuan River for at least several tens of thousands of years. He was a cunning man, and his scales were emitting a strong smell of oil. He was the kind of person who was extremely slippery. While the old demon dragon was talking and laughing with Wu Qi, he kept trying to find out about Wu Qi's background and all sorts of questions related to Wu Qi. Wu Qi dared not to tell this old demon dragon about his background. Instead, he kept making up stories, and at the same time, kept trying to find out more information from the old demon dragon. For example, he wanted to know the exact situation of Longyuan River's water system, the details of Meng Mountains where it flowed through, the old demon dragon's background, and why the demon beasts of Longyuan River, who were so powerful, did not come out from the mountains. Both of them talked and laughed merrily for the time it took to finish a pot of tea. After that, they exchanged a glance and gave each other a knowing smile, looking at each other and nodding their heads. Neither of them said anything useful. They were just babbling nonsense, but they made it sound as if they were telling the truth. Wu Qi looked at the old devil dragon, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. This old devil dragon wasn't easy to deal with. There were a few times when Wu Qi almost couldn't block his questions. Old demon dragon looked at Wu Qi and nodded his head repeatedly. Talent, this kid is a talent. His subordinates, who are as stupid as rocks, are completely incomparable to Wu Qi. It was a pity that he was a human. If he was a demon, the old demon dragon would definitely keep him in Longyuan River and let him take over his throne in the future. Whinnying Dragon King felt that he was about to attain the realm of heaven immortal. In the future, once he got rid of the body of demon dragon and transformed into the body of a true dragon, he would immediately leave Longyuan River and ascend to the place where he was supposed to go. However, among the countless demonic beasts in Longyuan River, there wasn't a single successor that caught his eye. Wu Qi was clever and cunning, but unfortunately, he was a human. Wanying Dragon King breathed out a sigh, looked at Wu Qi, grinned and said, "Not bad, little kid. Well, I've talked a lot of nonsense. Putting aside everything else, you should at least tell me your name, right? Tiske, don't tell me I'm going to keep calling you little kid or kid. You've saved the catfish flood dragon's life, so you're our honorable guest. Don't worry, I won't eat you in one bite." Wu pondered for a while, then he laughed and said, "My name is Wu Qi. Wu means don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you, and Qi means beg the heaven and earth for my life. The meaning of my name is that I will never lower my head and beg anyone." Wu Qi laughed dryly in his mind. His real name was Wu Qi, and Wu Qi was the name he gave himself after he was forced to join the anti-government Boy Scout troop. Even if Wanying Dragon King or those demon beasts around him had some kind of vicious curse technique, they could not do anything to him, Wu Qi. In the world of cultivators, the real name could not be easily revealed to anyone. Wu Qi, Wu Qi. The old demon dragon nodded his head and said, "Not a bad name, and the meaning is excellent as well. Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. TSK, sounds interesting." He casually pulled out a medallion made from dragon bones and threw it over to Wu Qi, smiled and said, "From now on, you're the honorable guest of all the demon beasts in Longyuan River. With this medallion, no demon beasts within 10,000 miles of both banks of Longyuan River will treat you as an honorable guest." The medallion was very heavy, as it was carved from the bones of a demon dragon. It was about the size of a palm, and on the front side of the medallion was a map, which should be the detailed layout of Longyuan River. On the back side was a picture of a dragon soaring in the wind, and two characters of Wanying were inlaid with tiny black pearls. There was also a thread of Wanying Dragon King's dragon aura in the medallion, which proved that it was an authentic one, and not an imitation. After receiving the medallion and thanking Wanying Dragon King, Wu Qi kept the medallion and did not put it in his heart. On the other hand, Wanying Dragon King was laughing in his mind. Since Wu Qi had accepted the bone medallion of Longyuan River as an honorable guest, he had established a friendship with Longyuan River. In the future, if something bad happened to the aquatic demon beasts in Longyuan River, Wu Qi would surely lend a helping hand. With a medallion, he had established a friendship with Wu Qi, and this old demon dragon had truly profited. While both men were having different thoughts, the stone wall above Catfish King's mansion suddenly shattered, and a tricolored ray pierced through the hole. However, upon Wanying Dragon King's arrival, he immediately unleashed his dragon core, unleashing a vast amount of water waves that covered the entire cave. When the tricolored ray shone down, they could only see the endless rolling water waves, and could not see the existence of tens of thousands of demon beasts underneath. As a demon dragon that was nearly a heaven immortal, Wanying Dragon King's divine ability and magical power were far stronger than Wang Jian, Wang Ben, and Wang Li. Although the mirrors in their hands were upper-grade magical treasures with incredible power, Wanying Dragon King's dragon core had been tempered by him for several tens of thousands of years, and its quality was close to that of an immortal item. Thus, how could these three mirrors be able to deal with it? The tricolored ray flickered and swirled, splashing and splashing onto the surface of the dark water waves, producing a magnificent seven-colored glow. Ying Zheng and his company slowly descended from the watery cloud, hovering above the water waves and looking down at the cave which had its cover uncovered. With both hands clasped behind his back, Ying Zheng was looking down at the cave in a domineering manner. Meanwhile, Su Fu was acting as his mouthpiece, grinning coldly and saying, "That catfish flood dragon, and that little guy, why don't you come out and accept your death?" Su Fu's facial muscles twitched. He hated Wu Qi to the core. His Dharma eye was nearly blinded by Wu Qi, and 70% of his soul essence was consumed by Wu Qi as well. All his cultivation base was nearly gone. If not for the spirit herbs secretly kept in Ying Zheng's inner palace, he would have long become a cripple. This was a deep and serious hatred. Su Fu swore in his mind that once he captured Wu Qi alive, he would put him into the cauldron and concoct him into a human core pill. Otherwise, how could he vent his hatred? Su Fu gave a loud cry and raised both of his arms up high. A large sheet of green flame flowed out from his palms, forming into two dark green ribbons around him. Su Fu's shriveled lips were wriggling as he recited some strange and abstruse incantation. Abruptly, the green flame exploded and wheeled around him, forming into a huge rune that looked like the character of thunder found in the ancient seal script. The rune was written in an ancient style, and when it was fully formed, wisps of thunderbolts kept bursting out from it, circling around it for a few times before fusing back into the rune. Accompanied by a deep and strange incantation, Su Fu held the rune with both hands and slowly waved them down. Abruptly, the rune transformed into a few hundred tiny thunderbolts, plunging down at top speed amidst a series of rapid popping noises. Waning Dragon King let out a loud laugh. He opened his mouth and sucked the dragon core back into his body. The water waves that blotted the sky disappeared in an instant. He laughed aloud and said, "That little kid named Ying Zheng, you haven't mastered your 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic? My boys, kill them all." He casually pointed his finger out. A stream of dark water soared up into the sky, transforming into a huge hand and greeted the thunderbolts that plunged down from the sky. The thunderbolts, which had a power equal to the full force strike of an early-stage nascent soul Earth Immortal, were easily grabbed and crushed into pieces by the hand. Amidst the wild laughter of the old demon dragon, the several tens of thousands of aquatic demons, Chi-Chi, unleashed all the innate divine abilities and various magical treasures that they had long prepared. Immediately, colorful poisonous fog and poisonous water soared up into the sky, transforming into a mass of poisonous gas that measured 100 miles in circumference and several tens of miles in thickness, wrapping around Ying Zheng and his company tightly. Countless magical treasures forged from tusks, horns, and scales flew up into the air and shot into the poisonous gas like raindrops. On the spot, several hundred Jin Dan grade Daqin soldiers had their bodies pierced through, while blood sprayed out from their mouths and drifted into the water like sieves. They were at the bottom of the lake, several tens of miles below the surface of the water. As such, the surrounding water element energy was extremely abundant, allowing the magical powers and divine abilities of several tens of thousands of aquatic demons to be brought into full play. Apart from Ying Zheng, the magical powers and divine abilities of the others were greatly restricted in this place. Several tens of thousands of aquatic demons had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. With a series of surprise attacks, the Daqin soldiers were in a very difficult situation. In just a blink of an eye, they had lost 70% of their men. Ying Zheng let out a shrill cry, "Waning Demon Dragon, it's you again!" Waning Dragon King laughed joyfully and said, "Little Ying Zheng, I'm your grandpa dragon. Last time, you had to use several tens of thousands of soldiers to cover the rear, and only then did you manage to escape. This time, you only have a few men with you, and I've brought all my boys from several tens of thousands of miles around here. If you can still escape, I'll spare your life the next time. What do you think? Run away, run away, run away." While roaring wildly, Waning Dragon King brought several tens of thousands of aquatic demons and soared into the sky, surrounding Ying Zheng and his company tightly. A white light flashed as Baichi leaped towards the old demon dragon with a sword in his hand. But suddenly, a shadow of a dragon tail flashed behind the old demon dragon's back, sweeping across and hitting Baichi head-on. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and was forced to retreat. Baichi's cultivation base was very close to the mastery stage of nascent soul realm, but the old demon dragon was a mastery stage nascent divinity cultivator. As long as he could transcend the heavenly tribulation, he would become a heaven immortal. The gap between their cultivation base was one major realm, and it was a gap that could never be made up for. With just one strike, Baichi was forced to retreat. Ying Zheng cried out at the top of his voice, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" The shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent soared into the sky from behind Ying Zheng's back, quickly forming into a fist-sized seal. Ying Zheng opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood, then cried out fiercely, "Old demon dragon, I swear I'll wipe out your entire clan." After that, he spat out 9 mouthfuls of blood essence onto the seal, then cried out, "9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, turning the sea into mulberry fields, 10,000 miles teleportation. The black seal exploded abruptly, while streams of blood burst out from Ingzheng's 7 apertures at the same time. A black light enveloped Ingzheng, as well as Li Si, Su Fu, Bai Qi, and all the important ministers standing beside him. Their bodies gradually turned blurry, then slowly disappeared from where they stood. Waning Dragon King flew into a great rage. "Are you trying to escape this time?" he roared. Abruptly, he transformed into a flood dragon that measured over 3,000 feet long, waving his claws and grabbing towards Ingzheng, who was shrouded in the black light. However, when his claws touched the black light, the bodies of Ingzheng and his company were like phantoms, and they did not suffer any harm. Wu Qi followed closely behind the old demon dragon and quickly approached Ingzheng. Then he performed the seal of minor universal star shifting with his right hand, and used the picking star's palm with his left hand to gently touch Ingzheng's left hand with his picking star's palm. With that, he removed the black dragon ring worn on the ring finger of Ingzheng's left hand. When the ring fell into his hand, Wu Qi immediately hid it under his sleeve. After that, he roared and yelled as he wielded the sword of Greedy Wolf and charged towards those soldiers and practitioners who were left behind by Ingzheng. The sword beam flashed, and a dozen heads flew up into the sky. Chapter 176. This bunch of rascals. Waning Dragon King stared at the spot where Ingzheng and his men disappeared with a gloomy expression, then casually crushed a few peak-stage Jin Dan Qin soldiers into pieces. The surrounding demon beasts swarmed up and attacked, slaughtering all the Qin soldiers and practitioners hovering above the Catfish King mansion. The sky was filled with Jin Dan, which were forcibly pulled out by the demon beasts. The demon beasts were laughing and playing with these Jin Dan, their eyes narrowed into 2 lines. For demon beasts, the Jin Dan of human cultivators was the best tonic. A single Jin Dan could save these demon beasts several hundred years of hard cultivation. Ingzheng had brought over 1,000 Jin Dan soldiers and practitioners to provoke them, which was equal to giving a generous gift to the aquatic demons of Longyuan River. Wu Qi was beaming with joy as well. Just now, when these demon beasts were busy killing the demon beasts, and when Jin Dan was flying all over the sky, Wu Qi had used a unique trick to stealthily fish out nearly 100 Jin Dan pills, which had a cultivation base of at least middle-stage Jin Dan. Together with the Jin Dan from the few talisman masters from Heavenly Spirit sect, his false core would be greatly improved, and his cultivation base would improve to a higher level. What a pity! Wu Qi shook his head helplessly as he looked at the glinting Jin Dan in the hands of those demon beasts with greedy eyes. He could not ask these demon beasts to spit out the food that had entered their mouths. These demon beasts were greedy by nature, and they were even greedier than Wu Qi himself. Shaking his head, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Waning Dragon King and said, "Old Dragon King, are you really going to let Ingzheng and his men go? How can you allow someone to sleep beside your bed? If Ingzheng and his men are not killed, your Longyuan River will never be peaceful." The dragon beard on Waning Dragon King's lips trembled as he said angrily, "Of course I have to kill them. But this group of juniors are running away at a frightening speed. Last time, when I revealed my true form and wounded Ingzheng, he had to use several tens of thousands of soldiers to detonate themselves and tie me down, allowing them to escape. This time, they escaped in such a strange way. Where can we find them?" Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. He hurriedly said, "The old Dragon King doesn't know where they are hiding, but I do. I've been going in and out of their camp dozens of times in the past few days. If I rush over now, I should be able to catch up to them and prevent them from escaping." Waning Dragon King raised his brows, and immediately let out a long and drawn-out dragon cry. Following his dragon roar, the Longyuan River, which stretched for an unknown distance, began to boil. Not only the main water vein of Longyuan River, countless demon beasts of various sizes, including those of nascent Soul Realm, Jin Dan Realm, and even Xiantian Realm of human cultivators, began to gather in Catfish Flood Dragon's mansion through the Dragon Essence Water Channel, formed innately in the Longyuan River. The Dragon Essence Waterway was similar to the teleportation array set up by human cultivators. It could allow demon beasts to quickly move from one region of water to another. The waterway did not consume energy stones, but the water element energy that was stored in the waterway. When the water element energy stored in the hundreds of thousands of Dragon Essence water channels in Longyuan River was completely depleted, several million demon beasts of various sizes had arrived at this place. Among these several million aquatic demon beasts, 3 of them were nascent soul and divine transformation realm great demons. They were a giant turtle, a giant crab, and a giant starfish. Once again Wu Qi was puzzled. Why would a starfish, a creature that lived in the deep ocean, appear in Longyuan River? All 3 of them had the cultivation base of divine transformation realm not too long ago. Although their nascent divinity had not stabilized yet, and could not leave their bodies to travel, their magical power and divine abilities were very frightening. Each of them could easily fight 3 to 5 peak stage nascent soul cultivators head-on. Apart from the 3 nascent soul and divine transformation realm great demons, there were nearly 1,000 aquatic demons whose cultivation base was equivalent to human nascent soul cultivators, and more than 50,000 Jin Dan realm aquatic demons. All the rest of the aquatic demons had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. Although their magical power and divine abilities were not very strong, relying on their enormous bodies and innate talent, they still possessed a combat strength that was much stronger than human cultivators of the same realm. Wu Qi's body was shivering when he saw the scene. He could not believe that the Longyuan River, this ridiculously huge river, had actually nurtured so many aquatic demon beasts. Perhaps it was because the water element energy stored in the Dragon Essence water channel had been depleted, as more demons had yet to arrive. Only heaven knew what the scene would be like when Wanying Dragon King summoned all the demons in the entire Longyuan River. However, the demons that were summoned now possessed a power that could destroy the heaven and earth. All these demon beasts were aquatic demons. Once they moved, they would be filled with water vapor and dark clouds. Millions of demon beasts had gathered in the sky above the Lake of Four Waters. The area several thousand miles in circumference was filled with dark clouds that blotted out the sky and blotted out the sun. Thunderbolts and lightning flashed crazily amidst the dark clouds, and a heavy downpour came whistling down. A vast expanse of white water curtains swept across the mountain ridges several thousand miles in circumference. Those towering trees, which stood 1,000 feet tall and required several dozens of men to wrap their arms around them, were bent over by the sudden storm. The giant hailstones brought along by the storm even broke the branches of these trees, and countless unlucky birds and beasts were smashed into meat paste by the heavy rain. The storm had even triggered mountain torrents. Yellow, muddy water poured out from various valleys and killed countless living beings. The water level of this section of Longyuan River had risen to a height of 1,000 feet. Many hills were submerged by the water, and only a small hill was left floating above the water surface, struggling to survive. Looking at the mighty aura of these aquatic demon beasts, Wu Qi felt his scalp going numb. Fortunately, these demon beasts were aquatic demons, and had no interest in walking on the shore. Otherwise, if one day they were not in a good mood, they might bring an army of thousands of men and horses to Great Yan Dynasty for a stroll. That would be a great disaster. Amidst the rumbling of thunder and flashes of lightning, Wanying Dragon King flew above the demon beasts and roared furiously. Since the ancient times, we, the people of Longyuan River, have always guarded our territory and never made enemies with anyone. A few months ago, there was a greedy junior who tried to capture me alive so that he could practice his cultivation. Today, it is the same daring junior who tried to capture and kill the master of Lake of Four Waters. See you. There is a saying among the humans, if this can be tolerated, what can't be tolerated? Today, we must flatten this group of human cultivators. The giant crab, giant turtle, and giant starfish, who had the strongest cultivation base, had revealed their true forms. Each of them was a giant demon with the circumference of several thousand feet. They were breathing demonic clouds and water vapor out of their mouths while roaring with a monstrous aura. When the 3 great demons unleashed their power, the water level rose another 1,000 feet. Following closely behind them, countless demons were roaring and roaring furiously, filling the air with a pungent smell of water. Whinnying Dragon King did not waste his breath. After boosting up the morale, he rode on a cloud and rushed to the forefront. Wu Qi rode on a sword beam and led the way, while the army of several million demon beasts rushed towards the direction of Qin Army's field headquarters in a mighty manner. When the aquatic demons made their appearance, a great amount of water in Longyuan River moved along with them. Wherever the aquatic demons went, the water of Longyuan River would surge and follow them. Countless mountains and forests were submerged by the water, and a vast expanse of whiteness ruled the land. Amidst the roars and roars of numerous demon beasts, Wu Qi and his company quickly arrived before the Qin Army's field headquarters. At the moment, the moon was hanging high above the western mountains, and the dawn of dawn was slowly rising from the east. Vaguely, a few wisps of red clouds could be seen looming in the east. In the Qin Army's field headquarters located in the valley, several 100,000 soldiers were lining up in a formation amidst a shrill cry of command. Numerous practitioners were hovering midair, their bodies shrouded in dark clouds and green mists. Holding long banners of strange shapes in their hands, they were nervously deploying various runes and restrictive spells, covering the entire field with countless layers of vicious and cruel restrictive spells. Rumble. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, countless dark clouds came sweeping over from all directions, as several million aquatic demon beasts surrounded the Qin Army's field headquarters from all directions. Huge waves rolled and rocked, rushing down from the surrounding mountains, forming into a white wall of water that stood nearly 1,000 feet tall near the valley where the Qin Army's field headquarters was located. Amidst the vast and mighty ocean, apart from those demon beasts with cultivation base and magical power who were stirring up the waves, there were also countless aquatic creatures who were brought here by the river, showing their mighty bodies and showing off their mighty prowess. There were all kinds of venomous snakes, piranhas, and many other ferocious creatures swimming in the water. The dark and dense shadows of these creatures made one shudder with fear. Escorted by Wu Qi, Catfish Flood Dragon and a few dozen other flood dragons, the giant turtle, the giant crab, and the giant starfish, Whinnying Dragon King rode a cloud and came to the sky above the Qin Army's field headquarters with a ferocious look. His eyes shone with an eerie golden gleam as he looked down at the Qin Army's field headquarters. Whinnying Dragon King cried out sternly, "Ing Zheng, little boy, chop off your own head and let me use it as a wine vessel. The rest of you, bring me your nascent souls, Jin Dan, and whatever you have. I'll make the decision and allow you to leave a thread of your true soul for reincarnation." Wu Qi nearly burst out laughing. Why did Whinnying Dragon King's words sound so similar to Bai Qitian, Li Si, and the others? Whinnying Dragon King cried out in a carefree manner, "Lord Dragon King, I understand the will of the heaven. The heaven has the virtue of cherishing every living thing, so it is not appropriate to kill all of you. Leaving a thread of your true soul for you to reincarnate is a good deed that will accumulate virtue. I only need to face one last thunder tribulation before I can ascend and become an immortal. As you have committed too many sins of killing, the thunder tribulation is too heavy, so it won't destroy your souls. Now that I've given you a chance to reincarnate, why aren't you kowtowing and kneeling down to thank me for my great kindness?" Wu Qi could not help but let out a laugh. He too flattered Whinnying Dragon King, and at the same time ridiculed Ing Zheng and the others. "You are absolutely right. Old Dragon King, you are the most merciful and kind man. Ing Zheng, Li Si, Su Fu, and the others should kneel down and kowtow to you." Ing Zheng, who had exercised a mystic technique and brought his trusted subordinates and ministers to flee, had his face pale. Together with all the senior ministers and generals, he flew up into the sky, facing Wu Qi and the others across the primordial talisman formation. Staring coldly at Wu Qi and Whinnying Dragon King, Ing Zheng sneered and said, "This is ridiculous. You are just a bunch of chickens and dogs, evil creatures who don't know the meaning of life and death. How dare you talk to me like this? Today, I'm going to kill all of you demons and devils at any cost." Looking at the venomous look in Ing Zheng's eyes, Wu Qi quickly took a step back, smiled at Ing Zheng and said, "Your Majesty, this is between you and old Dragon King. I'm just a guide. No matter how you fight, don't blame me." Whinnying Dragon King was very generous. He stretched out his hand and patted on Wu Qi's shoulder, laughed and said, "Ing Zheng, Wu Qi is just a guide. His cultivation base is too low, so he can't interfere in our business. Hee, this is between you and me. Hee, today either you die or I live, either I live or you die. In any case, you are dead meat." Wu Qi grinned and laughed. He did not expect this old demon dragon to be so humorous. His words made Ing Zheng's body tremble violently, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. With a stern look in his eyes, Ing Zheng gazed at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "What a low cultivation base. Whinnying Dragon King, if you have the capability, then break into my camp and take my life." Waving his sleeve, Ing Zheng brought all his ministers back to the wooden city. He stood on top of the city wall, staring coldly at the demon beasts that filled the sky. Wu Qi turned to look at Whinnying Dragon King. The old demon dragon pondered for a brief moment, then raised both of his hands and cried out, "My boys, attack! Kill them all and eat them all." While Wu Qi was puzzled by the order given by Whinnying Dragon King, he saw countless demon beasts swarming towards the Qin army's camp in a disorderly manner, like some hooligans fighting on the street. A loud boom rang out from the surrounding mountains, then they poured down from the lofty mountains with a frightening force, smashing forcefully onto the defensive ruins of the Qin army's camp. A bright light flashed, and suddenly, the defensive ruins above the Qin army's camp flickered with a strange flame. Chapter 177. When he saw the Qin army had activated the restrictive spell, Wu Qi instinctively retreated several hundred feet back, getting ready to slip away at any time. The first thing that was activated was the outermost layer of countless black runes hovering above the Qin army's campsite. These twisting black runes appeared out of nowhere in the air, emanating a bone-piercing cold air. A frigid wind rolled up from the ground, and a great amount of black snowflakes fell from the sky. Suddenly, a black blizzard swept across an area of 100 miles in circumference, blanketing the entire valley. Wherever the bone-piercing cold wind blew past, even the mountain rocks were frozen into ice cubes, turning into crystal-clear ice crystals that scattered all over the ground. The raging waves of numerous aquatic demons slammed forcefully onto the layer of black restrictive spell. The cold wind blew across, and a frigid air shot out in all directions. The raging waves froze abruptly, transforming into a several tens of miles thick black Xianbing barrier, firmly trapping the Qin army's campsite underneath. Inside the ice barrier, hundreds of thousands of venomous snakes, piranhas, water spiders, and all sorts of venomous aquatic insects and ferocious creatures were frozen by the frigid air, losing their lives in a blink of an eye. Nearly 10,000 aquatic demon beasts who charged at the forefront were frozen as well. Apart from a few demon beasts who had formed their demon cores and struggled for a few moments, all the other demon beasts had lost their signs of life. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. He had studied these runes in the script of ancient law before. Not only was the black cold wind bitingly cold and could hurt people, it also carried a thread of nether energy that came from the legendary nether palace of the netherworld, which was used to wipe out the lives of all living beings. In the Tao of ancient runes, these black runes represented the meaning of bitter cold and quietus. A restrictive spell formed from several 100,000 of these runes had an unimaginably mighty power. Waves kept slapping onto the black Xianbing barrier, but the frigid air kept spreading along the ice flood. In just a blink of an eye, all the raging waves that rushed into the valley were frozen, and the entire valley was sealed in ice. Over 100,000 large demon beasts were frozen in the ice. Those with stronger cultivation base could still struggle in the ice, but all the demon beasts with a cultivation base below the demon core realm had their lives reaped in just a blink of an eye. Whinnying Dragon King's brows twitched as he waved his hands and roared, "My boys, don't panic and be afraid. Just charge forward, charge forward. There are countless demons in my Longyuan River, so why would we be afraid of a mere few 100,000 of them? Use long-range spells. Use spells. You guys are 10 times more stupid than boars. Why are you rushing over? Astonished, Wu Qi gave the old Dragon King a look, who was waving his arms and legs and foaming at the mouth. Hesitantly, he grabbed Catfish Flooddragon's sleeve and asked, "Old Dragon King, have you never learned how to deploy an army? Has he never commanded an army in battle?" Catfish Flooddragon turned her huge catfish head over, staring at Wu Qi with her pair of gleaming golden fish eyes as she asked in surprise, "Formation of troops? What does it do? Command the army to fight?" Sigh, the old Dragon King has lived in Longyuan River for tens of thousands of years, and no one has ever challenged him. So why is he commanding the army to fight? Wu Qi loosened his grip on Catfish Flooddragon's sleeve and rolled his eyes. Once again, he prepared himself to flee at the first sign of danger. It seemed to him that apart from having an extremely strong cultivation base, this old Dragon King had no other strong points. Nevertheless, his temperament was very much to Wu Qi's liking. Although he was a cunning old fox, he was still a good man. Should he just watch him suffer a great defeat? While he was hesitating, several tens of thousands of demon beasts, including carps, green jades, snakeheads, grass carps, etc., suddenly rose into the sky on their demon clouds, opened their huge mouths and took a deep breath towards the river water in the distance. An immeasurable amount of river water rolled and flowed towards them, pouring into the stomachs of these demon beasts. Suddenly, the bodies of these fish demons, whose bodies were about 100 feet long and possessed the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, began to swell rapidly. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies had expanded to 300 feet to 500 feet. Their bodies were glowing brightly, nearly transparent, and their stomachs were filled with rolling river water. Abruptly, several tens of thousands of huge fish mouths aimed straight at the Qin army's campsite. Amidst ear-splitting whistling noises, several tens of thousands of water pillars, each as thick as a water bucket and moving at a speed not much slower than the sword beams, shot whistling towards the campsite, slamming viciously onto the thick and heavy Xianbing barrier that sealed off the entire valley. Amidst jarring screeches of friction, these rapidly spinning water pillars pierced through the Xianbing barrier like several tens of thousands of drilling drills, and in just a blink of an eye, they had penetrated a few miles deep into the barrier. Amidst the deafening cracking noises, countless cracks appeared on the Xianbing barrier, and even the bodies of the aquatic demon beasts trapped in the ice were shattered. The bodies of these fish demons shrunk rapidly, and the water in their stomachs was emptied in just a blink of an eye. All they could do was gasp for breath. Above the Qin army's campsite, another layer of misty white runes flashed. The layer of ice that was shattered by the water pillars shot out by these fish demons shattered abruptly, turning into countless ice swords and ice blades, each measuring about 10 feet long and looking extremely sharp. Abruptly, these white runes exploded, unleashing a tremendous explosive force that shattered the several tens of miles thick ice that filled the entire valley. Countless ice blades and ice swords shot out in all directions, accompanied by ear-splitting whistling noises. Wherever they went, the bodies of countless aquatic demon beasts would be ripped apart, their blood, internal organs, and scales splashing and filling the sky. Shrill and miserable howls of demon beasts could be heard everywhere. With just this single strike, over 300,000 Xiantian demon beasts gathered within an area of 100 miles were killed by these ice blades and ice swords. Broken limbs drifted everywhere along with the flood, while an enormous amount of blood dyed the entire area of 1,000 miles red. It was an enormous amount of blood from the bodies of 300,000 enormous demon beasts. At first glance, the entire place was dyed red, and even the great waves had turned into a blinding blood-red color. Waning Dragon King's lips were trembling with anger. He threw his head back and gave a long and loud cry. The head of an old man with gray hair abruptly transformed into the head of a ferocious flood dragon, while his body abruptly rose to the height of 30 feet. Scales emerged from all over his body, transforming into a thick and heavy armor that covered his body. Meanwhile, both of his hands had transformed into a pair of dragon claws. When he clenched his fists tightly, the claws collided with the scales on his palms and produced a large amount of sparks. "Kill them all," Kill them all. What are you waiting for? Han Zhu, Tan Shui, Lahai, bring your children in charge. Waning Dragon King cried out with a stern voice. Without hesitation, he ordered the 3 great demons to charge into the battlefield. Among the 3 great demons, the giant turtle called himself Han Zhu. He had been cultivating for several tens of thousands of years, and had produced 36 Dragon Balls on his back. This was the foundation for him to attain the Tao, and also the origin of his name. The giant crab called himself Tan Shui, as he loved to dig deep caves everywhere. Countless caves in Longyuan River were personally excavated by him, and that was the reason why he had this name. And the giant starfish was none other than Lahai. He called himself Lahai, but he actually lived in Longyuan River. He was a natural freak. Upon receiving the order from Old Dragon King, the 3 great demons immediately brought countless demon beasts and charged towards the Qin army's campsite. Right now, the Xianbing barrier was broken, and the Qin army's campsite was surrounded by the flood. All the demons could clearly see the beards on the faces of the Qin soldiers. It seemed that with just one charge, they would be able to break into the campsite and start a massacre. The giant turtle threw his head back and gave a long and sonorous cry into the sky. His body grew to 5 miles in circumference, coiling up a huge wave that stood 100,000 feet tall. Using himself as a weapon, he smashed forcefully towards the southwest corner of the Qin army's campsite. This giant turtle had a sturdy body and a huge body. He never liked to use divine abilities or dermic powers, and preferred to hurt his enemies with brute force. When it came to strength, apart from Waning Dragon King, no one in Longyuan River could be his match. On the other side, the giant crab spun his body, transforming into a cone-shaped dark wind that spun at high speed and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had drilled deep into the ground. Suddenly, the ground of the Qin army camp began to shake violently, and one large pit after another was sunk into the ground. From these pits, all sorts of aquatic poisonous bugs kept shooting out, shooting towards the nearby Qin soldiers like arrows, biting and stinging them. Meanwhile, the great starfish, Lahai, was seen hovering above the Qin army's campsite with a 5-colored demon cloud behind him. He slowly stretched his body, and suddenly, tens of thousands of tiny eyes opened up under his enormous 5-pointed star-shaped body. These eyes were blinking with 5-colored gleams. In the blink of an eye, countless 5-colored light needles shot towards the Qin army's campsite, bringing together a huge amount of 5-colored sand and a faint fragrance. The 3rd defensive mechanism of the Qin army's campsite had been activated. On the southwest corner of the campsite, 9 layers of yellow runes suddenly flashed and flashed, transforming into a thick and heavy yellow light barrier that greeted the giant turtle who was smashing down from above. A loud boom rang out. As the gigantic body of the giant turtle was too heavy, the yellow energy barrier was shattered into pieces, while a huge hole was ripped open on the defensive barrier near the southwest corner of the Qin army's campsite. Several thousand Qin soldiers did not manage to react in time, and were crushed into meat paste by Han Zhu's belly. Along with a loud boom, the ground of the Qin army's campsite began to light up with bronze runes. Suddenly, the soil and rock layer 10,000 feet under the ground of the campsite became a few times stronger than an iron that had been tempered 100 times. Suddenly, the hole that kept sinking was restored, and those poisonous bugs that rushed up to the ground were crushed to death by the Qin soldiers. Apart from a few hundred soldiers who were killed by the poisonous bug stings, the rest of the people were unharmed. Loud noises kept coming out from underneath the campsite, and the ground was shaking violently. It was the sound of the giant crab attacking the underground energy veins of the campsite in a flurried and exasperated manner. Meanwhile, more defensive mechanisms were charging towards Lahai. Meanwhile, 90% of the attention of the practitioners hovering in midair was focused on this strange and huge demon, who should not have appeared in Longyuan River. One after another, they raised up their long banners and waved them. Along with their chanting, streams of dark mists kept rushing out, forming into several tens of thousands of ghost soldiers who looked like skeletons, clad in black armors and wielding long blades in their hands. Needles of 5 colors sprinkled down from the sky, and the ghost soldiers who had just taken shape let out miserable howls and vanished into nothingness amidst the needles. Wherever the needles went, all the runes and formations were shattered, and before the several hundred practitioners could change their defensive mechanisms to counter the enemy, the needles had already pierced through their bodies. These practitioners let out miserable howls, as their bodies suddenly transformed into wisps of five-colored flame and quickly burned into nothingness. Hovering in the sky, Lahai took a deep breath. The five-colored smoke produced by the burning of these practitioners quickly fused into his body, making his body grow bigger. Meanwhile, those five-colored sand grains swept across the Qin campsite like a sandstorm. The bodies of several tens of thousands of Qin soldiers turned stiff when they were hit by the sand grains that contained a faint fragrance. All of a sudden, their bodies collapsed, turning into countless new five-colored sand grains and joining the boundless sandstorm. Wu Qi looked at the five-colored starfish and was struck with great astonishment. This was an ancient species, the five-light poisonous cold centipede, which was recorded in Scroll of Stealing. It had the shape of a starfish, but in fact, it was a poisonous insect born from a thread of vicious aura found in the heaven and earth. It was an expert in using five-colored enchantment, and there was a thread of innate poisonous energy in its body, which was an expert in polluting magical treasures and souls, as well as breaking defensive mechanisms. The five-light poisonous cold centipede was a quick-witted creature, and it was well-versed in the Tao of heaven and earth. Therefore, there were only a few defensive mechanisms that could trap it. Therefore, in front of it, the defensive formation of the Qin campsite was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. It was not because Su Fu and the other practitioners were useless, but because they had bumped into a natural enemy. The five-light poisonous cold centipede did not know anything about the Tao of defensive mechanisms, and it could not even understand the simplest single-origin formation. However, its innate divine ability allowed it to restrain over 70% of all defensive mechanisms under the heaven. Strange creatures born from the natural energies were just that unreasonable. Wu Qi could not help but let out a loud laugh. Ying Zheng and the others were really unlucky this time. Slowly, Lahai stretched his body and flew towards the depth of the Qin campsite. Following behind him, the five-colored needles and five-colored sand kept rolling towards the Qin army. Seeing that Lahai alone could shake the entire formation of Qin army, Bai Qi, who was standing right next to Ying Zheng, suddenly pulled out a strange-shaped bugle. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.